I was essentially playing God with a glass cage. Dropping a single egg in there felt like a divine miracle, providing for 100 souls for 5 straight days. I was their creator, but everything shifted when I pulled a tiny girl from the brink and heard her scream. That voice was undeniably human. This was no toy, it was a living, breathing medieval world suffocating under famine and conflict. My little survivor, Elara, was face down in the muck, desperately chewing on tree bark just to keep her heart beating. In her world, even a withered leaf was a treasure someone would kill for. I reached for some bread to end her suffering, but as she approached the village of Oakhaven, a wall of crimson dust choked the horizon. Raiders on skeletal horses charged with rusted blades, screaming for blood and grain. They brought nothing but slaughter. Villagers bolted their doors, but the wood splintered like matchsticks under their axes. A scavenger dragged Elara and her mother out into the filth. The child begged for mercy, sobbing that they were empty-handed. The leader just laughed. He didn't care. He simply raised his sword. The mother was cut down first. Elara collapsed in agony, wailing over the body while the killer stood there grinning, preparing the final blow. He lined up his blade with her throat. A violent, white-hot rage flared in my chest. Not in my house. I ripped the glass lid off and reached inside. I aimed right at the bastard and gave him a flick. Snap! The leader flew like a cannonball, soaring over the huts and into the wasteland, landing with his neck twisted at a lethal angle. The entire village went dead silent. The rest of the bandits stood there paralyzed, unable to process what they'd just seen. Their chief was gone, yet they saw no enemy then. Dozens of hateful eyes fixed on Elara. They figured she had summoned a demon. Another lowlife drew a steel to finish her off. I smirked, my hand descending through the fake clouds. I took aim and flicked again. Hard. Boom. The second man shrieked as he was launched 12 meters back in the dirt. He hit the ground as a broken mess. The survivors started scattering like panicked rats in the light. But then, the little girl slowly tilted her head back, her eyes cut through the artificial clouds and locked onto mine with terrifying clarity. Her gaze was completely hollowed out by pure terror. A tiny spark of hope remained as she fell to her knees before me. Holy Lord, deliver us. My heart skipped a beat. These weren't plastic figures, they were real, breathing people. Seeing those animals corner her made my blood boil. Burn in hell, I raised my hand high, flattened my palm, and brought it down hard on the raiders. A massive roar echoed through the tiny town. Bone turned to dust, meat gave way heavy. Wet thud followed. I mashed one guy into a red stain on the ground. Blood painted the dirt. Then I struck again. Crack, thud, crunch. I was swatting them like annoying insects. Each heavy hit left a fresh pool of gore. In seconds, that entire pack of wolves was gone, reduced to a pulp. I drew my hand out, coated in red. The smell of copper hit me hard. I fell back, shaking uncontrollably. Below me, survivors crawled out to strip the dead. They started digging holes. This thing was real. A miniature world, actually alive. I washed my hands. Feeling the weight of it all, I passed out immediately. The rush died, leaving me hollow. I didn't wake up until the morning sun hit my face. I rushed back to the glass. Elara was out there again, clutching a ruined basket with trembling legs. She was fading, dragging herself through the wasteland, clawing at the dry earth for anything to eat. She was starving to death. She wouldn't last the day. Kid, you re-hurting, I muttered. She heard me. Her head snapped up like she'd been hit by lightning. She looked straight through the glass, right at my face. Divine Master, she fell, shaking like a leaf. I am hungry. Please have mercy and save me food. Easy fix. I ran to the kitchen. 2 boiled eggs were sitting on the counter. I grabbed one. I ran it under cold water and peeled the shell. I hovered over her world. Here, this is for you. She stood still, staring at the sky in pure shock. I gripped the egg and lowered it into her reality. I set it in the dirt. Her mouth fell open. She could move. This was tea breakfast. It was a monstrous egg, 90 feet of solid white. A 30-foot mountain of steaming meat loomed over her. A giant white tower blocked her path. She stumbled back, her voice cracking. Is this? Just eat the damn thing, I snapped. Finally, she braced herself and charged the massive white orb. Her teeth ripped through the elastic surface. She plunged her face into the sudden, jagged crater, drowning in the yolk like a starving beast. After a few muffled cries of joy, she stopped. She backed away, staring at the clouds with pure dread. Great Spirit, may I call the others? We have to finish this before it spoils. I grinned. She had such a remarkably soft heart. Go get them. She frantically made the sign of the cross, then hauled away a golden slab. She sprinted for the village, howling for help. Chief Thomas, everyone hurry. We have a feast. 42 villagers soon swarmed. They circled the monolith with 84 wide, staring eyes. Thomas's graybeard twitched in total disbelief. Is this truly a blessing from the great beyond? Garrick, mouth already full, nodded like a madman. The scent. I have never smelled anything like it. The chief barked an order. Garrick, move, get the steel. Every household gets a portion. Stop shoving. They gripped their battered wooden bowls, harvesting the yellow core with manic, desperate joy. Even after the feast, the bulk remained. It was stuck, truck to prevent a lethal, rotting stench. I reached inside, scooping up the sticky leftovers. I tossed the whole mess into the trash. Watching it fly into the sky, they collapsed. 42 souls screamed, Damon. It was tea enough. A diet of eggs is a slow death. I grabbed my jacket and drove to the store. I bought bags of oats and wheat. I added bacon, cabbage, and a box of salt. Back home, I sliced the bags open. The grain smelled earthy. I picked up my magnifying glass. I focused on her crumbling, pathetic little shack. It was depressing. Time to have some fun. I cupped my hands over the hole in her roof. I let the wheat pour like a dam. Shisha, the living room vanished under a sea of grain. I pulled up a chair to watch. Elara returned at dusk, carrying a miserable basket of weeds she had scavenged from the hills. She opened the door and hell broke loose. A golden tidal wave burst out, drowning her instantly. Each individual kernel of grain looked like a jagged, 2-foot-long boulder weighing at least 100 pounds. She stood paralyzed as the mountain fell, ready to be buried. I reached in, blocking debris. The crushing weight of the harvest stopped, but one stray grain still knocked her to the ground. Terrified, she saw my shadow stretching across the heavens. She realized her god was just playing. Trapped among seeds thicker than her legs, she started laughing hysterically, her grief suddenly gone. The shock numbed her recent tragedies. The villagers gathered while Garrick fought to reach her. He moved the boulders aside to save her. The old man stared at the giant kernels. Trembling, we will need a heavy axe just to cook this meal. A miracle from above, then a sharp, hateful scream echoed from the front village gates. Listen up, you losers, pay the baron. The color drained from every face in the square. Terror hit them instantly. Mothers clamped their hands over their babies' mouths to keep them quiet. The elder panicked, his heart nearly bursting. The tax collectors are here. Hide it now. Get rid of the evidence. They cannot see what we have found. Garrick and the men frantically shoved the miracle into the shadows, guarding the door with shaking bodies. I narrowed my eyes at the edge of the glass display. 5 tiny figures appeared, wearing red coats and carrying swords with the tyrant's crest on their backs. I checked the case 3 times for a hole. The lid was locked. Vents were too small. This world was no longer a game. The thugs marched in, their boots crunching on the floor. Pay your taxes or rot in a cell. The elder bowed, wearing a mask of fake humility. My lords, the sky has been dry for 3 years. We have been eating the very dirt. We have no grain left. Liar, you rehoarding. The lead guard floored him like a dog. He spearheaded the raid, trashing the villagers' homes. They ransacked every corner before a sudden chill of realization hit. The villagers' eyes were glued to the shack. A few bruisers were putting their weight against the shattered entrance. They braced hard against the splintering wood. The lead thug smirked, barking a sharp order to get a move on. Not a soul moved. Fine. Rot then, he spat, slamming his boot home. The door gave way, sending Garrick and Elara tumbling back. Lacking any resistance, the doorway just blew apart. An avalanche of massive white wheat kernels flooded out. The boss went pale, his eyes wide with pure shock. He tried to scramble back, but he wasn't fast enough. The shifting weight of the grain swallowed his legs. His 4 goons unsheathed their blades, trembling in their boots. Silence hung heavy for 10 long seconds. Then the trapped man let out a gut-wrenching scream. What's wrong with you morons? He shrieked. Stop gawking and pull me out of this mess right now. His team started digging through the weird white rocks. They couldn't have stopped staring at the giant, egg-shaped seeds everywhere. Wait, is this really supposed to be grain? Nothing grows like that. The elder finally pulled himself up. That's sacred seed. A blessing from the Almighty. Defile it, and the Creator will show you no pity. The 5 thugs traded looks of sheer avarice. Spare us the fairy tales. This bounty is ours now. This is the Baron's property. He leveled a finger at the girl. Grab this lying sorceress and get the pyre ready. I just gripped my smartphone and started snapping away. I caught a few high-definition frames of those low-life extortionists. I reached over the enclosure. Want to play with fire? Fine. You were gonna get exactly what you wanted. Watching them close in, the girl started screaming her head off. Back off. You need to run for your lives. The hand of God is upon you. He'll wipe you out. The collectors just squinted at the cloudless horizon. There wasn't a cloud in sight. You're out of your mind. Kid, party's over. The leader let out a nasty grin. He hoisted his sword to cut her down. I didn't hesitate. I brought my thumb and forefinger together. As if I were squashing a bug, I pinched him. The collector let out a piercing, high-pitched yelp. He wailed like a dying animal under a massive, unseen force. His frame crunched like dry twigs in my hand. I pulled my hand up, leaving his boots swinging in midair. I kept him dangling 40 feet up, his legs thrashing against the thin air. He kicked frantically, screaming about a demon from the pits. The other 4 guys just froze, paralyzed by pure, raw terror. They hit the deck while the guy in my fingers made a total mess of himself, sobbing for his life. He begged for any god to intervene. He promised to be better, but his pathetic whining just made me sick. Taking a deep breath, I lined up the punks below. Then I let it rip. A sudden, savage wind blasted through the valley. It was like a Category 12 hurricane hit them with pinpoint, deadly force. The group was tossed around like dry weeds in the invisible gale. They skidded across the ground for yards before face-planting in the dirt. Peering over the rim, I barked a single word. Beat it. The sound boomed like a massive brass bell, making the whole ground shake. Elara jumped in, backing up my demand for them to vanish. I warned them to stay quiet, a deal they were more than happy to make. Pledging their silence, the lead thug finally felt me let go. The man fell like a stone, hitting the dry earth with a heavy thud. Battered and confused, he scrambled up, Barely knowing which way was up, he took off after his friends, sprinting through the village like a lunatic. I watched them flee until they hit the far edge of the desert. The wasteland just ended at the glass walls of my hobby tank. Surprisingly, they didn't smack in the glass, they just kept moving. There was no crash, and they didn't end up on my rug. They just vanished into thin air. My mind started spinning. It finally clicked. This tank was a portal to a whole other world. The villagers were still face down in prayer, so I signaled for them to look up, pass out the food. Now, tell me, where exactly am I? And what's the current year? Elara shouted my questions to the group. All 42 tiny people just stared back, looking completely clueless. Their chief looked baffled, rubbing his chin in total confusion. A nation, a calendar, they didn't even understand the words. Nobody had left town in forever. They had zero perspective. I sighed. Trying to get info from these locals was a waste of time. Panicking at my annoyance, the old man stammered out a plan, please. Don't be mad, we read just simple people. But we can get the truth. The smart folks in the nearby city. The Baron scribe knows things. That guy has the knowledge. He grabbed Garrick, his best fighter. Garrick, round up the men before sunrise. Fill up on that magic food and go grab that scholar from the castle. If you want to come quietly, now come out and bag him. We can fail our protector. Garrick gave a firm salute. Leave it to me, I watched, stunned by their sudden, savage determination, kidnapping a character. This story just took a nasty detour. I flipped the switch and crashed. At 7 the next morning, I checked the tank immediately. Garrick was already moving out with a squad. Grit-toothed kids hunched over, swallowing mouthfuls of bark-heavy slop as sweat soaked through their bone-tired bodies. A girl clutched her basket, ready to hunt for weeds. I opened the fridge and tore off a crisp green leaf. It was 16 inches long and dripping with cold water. I leaned over the glass, watched her wander off, and dropped it. That massive green blade tumbled down, blocking out the sun for them. From her tiny view, a giant emerald roof, nearly 1,000 feet long and 300 feet wide, crashed down like a falling peak. Used to my acts of God, she didn't even flinch. She just hit her knees and hollered for the others. Her yelling summoned the whole tribe for a feast. With stomachs finally packed, the little town started buzzing with life. People began mending clothes, throwing pottery and hammering red-hot metal. I couldn't stop staring at them. Then Elara dragged a pail into her hut, locking everything up tight, but her thatched roof had a gaping hole. I felt a jolt of nerves and leaned in. I grabbed my magnifying glass to spy through that opening. She was standing on boxes, staring straight up. We locked eyes across realities. Her face turned a bright, angry red instantly. Panicked, she kicked the door open and sprinted toward the old man's hut. I pressed my ear closer and caught the old man jagged, quiet scolding. Having God's eyes on you is a miracle. If he wants you to serve, you do it. Elara trembled, then crawled back inside to shade her clothes. I jerked my head away, feeling sick. Being a creep was one line I would never cross. End of story. Hunger was everything. Staying alive was the only goal. Meanwhile, Garrick guided 3 guys toward the walled city. They slunk past the fortifications, witnessing nothing but suffering until they hit the ancient rock bridge. Sentries were pummeling some chubby guy in fancy clothes. The poor bastard screamed, his yells bouncing off the cobblestones. Sir, I just suggested we feed the beggars. This is pure insanity. You're slaughtering the golden goose. Garrick's eyes went wide. That's the guy the old man talked about. Barnaby, we got him. The bruised victim staggered into a pitch-black, cramped back street. Garrick cut him off, swinging a thick timber bat. The rest of the crew boxed him in from behind. Barnaby held up his shaking palms. Look, I was only defending the commoners. The good book calls that advocacy. Garrick shrugged. Don't care, buddy. Start walking toward Oakhaven. No way. We call that a decline. The whack. A massive hit crushed his neck. Barnaby's stare went blank as he face planted. The boy hissed, blabbermouth. My arms just reacted, lights out. The 4 of them grabbed the dead-weight official and ran for the exit. They nearly collided with a city watch unit. Garrick's knees turned to water. Wasn't he that the same thug who shook us down for every penny yesterday? The one I threw? Great, those 5 goons saw Garrick. They assumed I dispatched a hit team to hunt them down. Their faces turned pale as sheets. Garrick stammered, my paws just hammered. Going to river, the lead guard exhaled nervously. Go ahead, and about yesterday, we won't say a word. Both groups were trembling as they walked past. Seconds later, they sprinted away from each other for dear life. Night fell. Garrick dropped Barnaby's unconscious frame at the village entrance. Sunset arrived. All 42 villagers gathered, staring holes through Barnaby. He felt the shivers. Look, let's play nice. We can talk. You know what they say about blood and money. Elara stepped up, cocking her head as if listening to ghosts. Who are you really? What's the current date? Barnaby bowed his head quickly, trying to survive. I'm Barnaby, the former clerk. It's the year 1315, July. This mess is what people call. Actually, there's no word for this hell. I fell back, frozen, 1315, the start of the Great Famine. Non-stop downpours, decaying crops, the beginning of the real dark ages. Mass starvation, total war, and the first steps of the Black Plague. The games were over. This was a medieval apocalypse come to life. I maintained a blank stare. Elara asked him who sits on the throne. Barnaby's head snapped side to side. A nobody like me can just utter the king's sacred name. That's a death sentence. I lost my cool. Break him, Elara commanded. The villagers snatched up clubs, pitchforks, and broken ceramic, tightening the ring around him. They crowded him so closely a mouse could slip through. Barnaby shielded his head and screamed in sheer terror. Edward, the king's name is Edward. That was the proof. This is the age of death and misery. Playtime ended. This wasn't a simulation anymore. I turned, booted my computer, and began researching the past. Tired eyes flickered over the ancient mortality ledgers. Just keep him fed. The restless mob finally drifted away. Pleading for his life, Barnaby narrowly avoided disaster. He slipped in the cooking quarters, gasping for air. He went stiff. Enormous seeds rested there like boulders, 18 inches long, dense alien monoliths. A solitary leaf served as a barricade. Who provided this? He cried out. Elara gave a disinterested shrug. No one knows. The great voice has gone quiet. My vision throbbed after 48 hours of intense investigation. Feeding 42 souls is trivial. Rescuing millions is a fantasy. Handouts fail. They need a sustainable infrastructure. Initial stage, provide them with fresh hydration. A standard garden sprayer would hit them like a catastrophic hurricane. It would literally level their tiny hovels. I reached for a clear plastic storage bin. Moving toward the enclosure, I dipped my hand in. My fingertips plunged deep into the wet earth. A roar like thunder, the soil erupted. The ground fractured as a dust cloud choked the settlement. A massive shadow blotted out the light. I manually gouged a 30-foot chasm with my bare hands. The entire community witnessed the impossible. Barnaby huddled in the muck, paralyzed with dread. His gaze was fixed in sheer disbelief. I wedged the plastic basin into the trench. I tilted the pitcher and unleashed a torrent. A vertical cascade plummeted from the heavens. Massive amounts of liquid crashed into the hollow, steam billowed as the reservoir reached its brink instantly. It remained there, crystal clear and undisturbed. For 60 seconds, time itself seemed to stop. It's like the parting of the sea. Barnaby stuttered. A divine sign. Elara groaned at his flair for the dramatic. Then the silence broke. Screams of jubilation erupted. Hope was reborn. Agriculture was finally viable. I will top off the supply every morning. I promised. Kick that bureaucrat back to the royal court. If he starts gossiping, silence him immediately. Barnaby bowed until his head hit the ground, then sprinted off. Hydration solved. Next, sustenance. I picked up a premium slab of prime hog. I carved off a portion and let it fall. A literal mountain of raw protein slammed into the dirt. Streaky meat landed with a thud. Garrick's eyes flashed with a hunter screed as he unsheathed his blade. Hold it. I thundered. Your stomachs can't handle a banquet. Ration out 50 grams apiece. Preserve the remainder, but fear gripped them. How could they keep it fresh without any curing agent? The flies will have it, they wailed, so they required seasoning. I grabbed a half-used container of table salt from the pantry. Positioned over the clearing, I snapped my wrist. Whoosh, a blinding white slide cascaded down. Glistening, jagged chunks of sodium chloride rained down like deadly frozen pellets, stacking into a sparkling peak by the entrance. Those tiny figures collapsed in tears before the white summit, their cries reaching my ears. Once salt was worth its weight in blood, now I gifted them a lifetime supply. By nightfall, the rich aroma of stewing meat and thick porridge drifted from every small, straw-roofed cottage. Garrick downed 5 servings without blinking. With the famine broken, I looked to their safety. In this harsh landscape, the real dangers were looming. Outlaws were a constant threat. Their flimsy tools were no match for a raid. I drove over to visit Kai, a pro at building high-end models. I sent him $2,000 via my phone instantly. Build me a custom stronghold 1 to 200 scale, pure steel 1 millimeter thick. Reinforced metal, slit openings for defense, no glass. K made a face, a metal castle that's gonna look hideous. No aesthetic appeal, he complained. Just build it, I barked. Include heavy-duty tires and a remote-controlled engine. K looked like he'd seen something terrifying. Is this a bunker or a war machine? What's the point? I'll pay you double, he gave in. Fine, give me 30 days. 30 days for a fort? I needed a distraction. I spent 5 days grinding out a concept, our project for a studio, pocketing $3,000, just enough to cover my rent. After finishing the job, I checked on the tiny civilization and went cold. The reservoir level had dropped by a full 6 inches. That made 0 sense. In their world, that was an entire ocean of water. Vanished in a night, I raced to review my home security footage. 2 in the morning, a line of skeletal, desperate figures carrying miniature pails crept toward the settlement. Beneath the dim moon, they filled their containers and vanished into the shadows. They completed 3 frantic runs before the sun began to rise. By first light, my people were examining the strange tracks. Garrick gripped a cudgel, his face red. They've looted the master stores. They drank the sacred spring, hunt them down, execute the intruders. I lean over the glass, my voice rumbling like a storm. Elara. Tell them to hold their fire. Those are just starving, parched refugees. A couple of gallons was nothing to me. But to them, it was life itself. I can replenish this entire world on a whim. Their fury evaporated. They fell to the ground once more, sobbing at the sheer scale of their creator's compassion. 3 in the morning, I was picking at some cold takeout while staring at the display right on cue. They surfaced at the northern edge. The looters were back, led by some guy with a thick, messy beard. Behind him, dozens of silhouettes crawled toward the water bank. They hit the edge and just stopped dead, completely shell-shocked. The basin they had blood dry yesterday was somehow brimming with water again. The boss let out a low snarl. Quit worry about where it came from, he hissed. Just fill the damn jugs and stay quiet. They lapped it up like stray dogs before frantically dipping their containers. Seeing those bone-thin, broken souls made my chest tighten with pity. I wanted to toss them some grain, but in their world a single kernel would land with the force of a falling skyscraper. I headed for the kitchen, searching for a workaround. I grabbed the bag of flour and pinched the smallest, most microscopic speck. At 200 times the scale, those specks looked like heavy white stones. I held my breath, gripping the fine dust between my fingers. While they remained fixated on drinking from the pond, I lowered my hand into the miniature landscape without making a sound. I rolled my fingertips together, letting the dust settle into the mud. Out of thin air, a massive mountain of white boulders suddenly materialized. The leader stood up and swung his carrying pole over his shoulder to leave. Then he just froze. His heavy wooden pails hit the dirt. Water soaked into the ground. But he did not care. He was staring at that mountain of flour with his eyes about to pop. His crew started losing it, yelling about the wasted water. Shut the hell up, he screamed. Look at this. The whole crowd stood there like they were under some kind of spell. The boss dove forward, snatching up one of those huge white rocks. He took a bite. It is pure, high-grade white flour. He croaked in a voice that was half scream and half sob. Trembling, he whispered that this was Oakhaven's doing. They knew the refugees were out here, bleeding their supplies dry. Instead of a death sentence, they had shown them a quiet, impossible mercy. They had fed them. The men broke down, sobbing with relief. Dump the water. Use every single bucket for the white gold. He barked, if you drop so much as one speck, I will kill you myself. They dumped their haul and dried those buckets fast. They packed away every single grain with the kind of desperate care you would show a diamond. Before they vanished, the leader dropped his tools and took a knee. He pressed his hand over his heart, facing the direction of Oakhaven. This gift I, Rowan, will never forget. I will pay you back. When I heard that name, my blood turned to ice. Rowan, I bolted to my computer and started digging through those old historical archives I had bookmarked earlier. This was the match that lit the fuse of the Great Peasant Uprising. This was the moment that would eventually burn the entire kingdom down. The legendary war where farmers slaughtered the royal army and forced the king to run. It all started with this one bearded man. The thief I had just hand-fed with a tiny pinch of dust. I watched him disappear into the shadows, and my skin began to crawl. The father of the revolution was sitting right in the next county. The local baron was basically a dead man walking, waiting for execution. Peasant rage was about to boil over and torch everything. Oakhaven was next, and the steel fort I ordered was still weeks out. I could not wait for a delivery while the world was going up in flames. My village needed protection now. I scanned my cluttered room. An old, jagged piece of metal scrap was hanging off my coat rack. Right next to my keyboard sat a plastic bin of building blocks. A slow, wicked grin spread across my face. You will do. I snatched that sharp, rusted piece of scrap steel. Clutching a handful of plastic blocks, I marched over to the diorama. Listen up, Rowan, since the world is ending anyway. I am going to give Oakhaven a taste of high-tech industrial hell. Raw, heavy firepower. Then the first light of morning hit the floor. Elara kicked the creaking door open just as the sun broke through. I was still holding that jagged metal strip from the rack. It was 4 inches long and barely 0.3 millimeters thick. I lined it up with the soil at her feet and let go. Boom, to those tiny people down there. A massive slab 60 feet long and 30 feet wide had just fallen from the heavens. 2 feet of solid iron slammed into the dry dirt. Dust clouds shot 30 feet into the air. Elara just stood there, paralyzed. Her face went white as a sheet. God, are we supposed to eat iron now? I cannot chew that. I let out a soft laugh. Don't be greedy. That is for forging plate armor. The blacksmith came sprinting over, circling the metal and slapping his legs in shock. It is too big. My forge cannot melt a mountain like this. Stop your whining, I said, reaching my hands down through the clouds. I pinched that 0.3 millimeter sliver of metal. I started flexing it back and forth until the steel began to groan. Snap, the steel gave way. I cracked it again. Snap, snap. To the villagers, 2 massive hands descended from the sky, ripping through that solid iron slab like it was wet paper. 2 feet of solid steel shattered into dozens of chunks, like a giant casually crushing crackers into a bowl of soup. Pure holy terror hit them. Every last villager dropped to their knees. Move, I barked. Get this to the forge and get to work. The raiders are coming. Every young man needs a suit of chainmail. Forge your steel. Take their blades. We are going to war. Protect this sanctuary until your last heartbeat. They scrambled to gather wood, desperate to feed the massive fires. While they slaved away, I grabbed a bin of filthy toy bricks. Click, click, click. My hands moved in a blur, snapping together a neon barricade. I jammed the structure into the mud at Oakhaven's edge, leaving one narrow gap for a door. The floorboards trembled. A low growl of thunder filled the room. The locals looked up, paralyzed with terror. A colossal, prismatic wall 20 feet high surged from the dirt, locking the village inside a plastic cage. Elara scaled the studs like a rock climber, screaming, "The creator has sent us a fortress. Everyone, start building the heavy timber gates. We have to hold back the raiders." The villagers chopped down massive oaks, stripping the bark and trying to lash the trunks together. It was a disaster. The cheap string they used snapped the second they pulled it tight. A pile of logs came crashing down. Hours of brutal work vanished. Watching their failure, I reached for my fishing gear under the bed. I pulled out a 0.4 test line. It was only 0.1 millimeters wide, but to them, it looked like a massive 2-centimeter steel cable. I cut a piece and dropped it into the square. Use this. A shimmering, glass-like rope drifted from the ceiling. The men hacked at it, their blades going dull as they sweated and gasped for air. 6 strongmen yanked on the ends, but the line didn't budge an inch. It's harder than iron and thick as a man's arm. Is this a holy trap? Will God kill us for cutting it? I yelled down, "Don't be stupid, it's just a tool, get back to work." Using that unbreakable cord, they finally bound 2 massive wooden doors 20 feet tall. Their gear was solid, but they had no plan. I ordered Garrick to find Barnaby, that office worker the Baron fired. I needed his brains. The moment Garrick hit the town square, the Baron's fortress dissolved into total chaos. Barnaby cornered a guard who hissed. The Baron's thugs hit Clearwater to bleed them for taxes. Since the grain was gone, they stole the winter seeds. Barnaby felt a cold wave of dread. Stealing the seeds is a death sentence. A killer named Rowan lived in Clearwater. This would start a massacre. He turned and ran. I raced through the yard, slamming into Garrick at the door. News of Oakhaven's new armor meant war. The Sovereign's old prophecy was finally coming true. Rowan was starting a revolution. I shoved my wife toward Garrick. "Take my girl and the staff. Get to Oakhaven. Find the Sovereign's sanctuary. Get out now." Garrick, always loyal, grabbed the family and bolted for the town limits. As they left, a mob appeared on the hills. Covered in soot, hundreds of furious men swarmed the town, swinging heavy iron flails. Leading the riot was the butcher, Rowan the ruthless. "Death to the thief who stole our food. Follow me." Storm the fortress, kill the Baron. The uprising exploded. A wave of starving refugees smashed the gates, lunging at the castle like wolves. The guards were so terrified they ditched their armor to hide in the gutters. The entire township spiraled into a waking nightmare. I didn't take a run. I traded my designer clothes for rags and messed up my hair to look like a beggar. Using the riots as a shield, I crept along the walls toward the dark blacksmith district. I kicked in Cedric's door. The best smith on the planet, the mob is butchering every noble they find. "Escape with me to a real leader. I'll give you freedom." Cedric had been a slave for his whole life. The idea of being free made his eyes burn. "I'm in." We used the city's slaughter as our cover. We vanished from the chaos, making a run for Oakhaven's border. Miles away, Garrick led my wife, Beatrice, through the woods, spoiled by money. She spent the whole trip whining. When she saw Oakhaven's gates, she went silent. Massive, glowing walls reached into the clouds. Endless piles of meat and a crystal-clear lake waited. Elara gave her 2 wheat stalks and salt crystals. "Eat your fill, it's a gift from the Sovereign." My wife trembled with pure fear. Nearby, a group of locals struggled to lift the giant wooden gates. Someone slipped, and the 1,000-pound door fell toward the old village leader. Watching the monitor, I reached out and caught the falling gate with my fingertip. The heavy door stopped, breaking every law of physics. Elara's shriek ripped through the quiet like a blade. Beatrice just stood there, paralyzed, watching that unseen power glide by with lethal elegance. She collapsed, her knees sinking deep into the icy slush, fingers trembling. She frantically traced crosses over her heart, praying for mercy. "He's come for us. I'm finally seen." Years of empty prayers and fake piety had all led to this terrifying, luminous second. The pious noblewoman turned into my most loyal zealot overnight. When night fell, Barnaby brought the master Cedric to the age. Cedric couldn't he stop staring at the workers inhaling that rich, greasy stew. They were basically devouring the meat and grains like starved animals. His eyes drifted up to the shimmering, impossible height of the wall. The sheer weight of this lord's power crushed his very soul. I hovered above their tiny existence, balancing a bowl of hot ramen, peering into the plastic container. I signaled for the blacksmith. "Can you shape the fire?" I asked. Using Elara to relay my words, Cedric straightened up, though his pride flickered out like a dying candle. "I've forged heavy artillery since I was 10. Handguns or nothing." He bragged loudly about building whatever the Lord demanded. I let a single printed page flutter down into their claustrophobic little world. It descended like a massive, white, bone-chilling funeral shroud. A sudden gust sent the tiny villagers scrambling for cover. On the ground, the paper detailed the intricate guts of a modern rifle. Every tiny spring and firing pin was drawn with murderous clarity. It was the ultimate project for a god's personal gunsmith. A breechloader, lethal, fast, and didn't need a factory. Cedric scaled the wall, looking down at the Titanic complex blueprint. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead as the complexity hit him. This is beyond perfect. I can promise this quality." "Take your time," I whispered. "You have years to master the craft. Finish it, and I'll give you everything you want." Cedric clenched his jaw, his voice vibrating with sudden religious fervor. "I'm yours, but I have one bold request. I need to see your face, my own eyes, then jump," Elara commanded. Without hesitating, he hurled himself into the abyss. I moved my hand, catching his tiny body in my palm. He tumbled across my skin, feeling the touch of something truly cosmic. That divine contact completely snapped whatever sanity he had left. He hit the dirt hard, his knees buckling into the soft earth. "I'll die for you, I'll forge your lightning." I picked up a discarded soda can and sliced it right in half. Using my shears, I carved a jagged, silver entryway into the metal. I flipped it over and shoved it into their town square. A massive thud rattled the ground, shaking their tiny bones. A blue metal dome with giant, alien branding suddenly loomed over them. "Live inside, I'll build you a real castle soon." The villagers just stood there, too traumatized to even process the change. Beatrice rubbed her face into the filth until she bled. Night came. I clicked off my lamp and browsed the web. The monitor glowed. Suddenly, I heard a strange scratching at the container's edge. Tiny torches flickered in the dark. A miniature wagon train stopped outside the plastic fortress. The leader, covered in soot and blood, was Rowan. Fresh from a massacre, he'd executed the Baron and raided the entire food supply. Despite being hunted, he stopped here just to settle old debt. To pay for the flour, Rowan yelled at the walls. "Oakhaven, I brought 2 grain wagons to wipe my slate clean." I winced. Taking stolen goods was a death warrant. It reeked of high treason. Our little village wasn't built for that heat. The crown's wrath would level us before I could even issue a single command. Barnaby climbed the wall, his voice sharp and dangerous. He sounded like a street-smart criminal. "Listen up, Rowan. We appreciate the gesture, but you're fleeing. Those wagons are your life. They're a luxury for us, but survival for you. Keep them." Rowan's men started panicking in the shadows, begging him to take the advice. Rowan just gave a slow nod. He slammed a fist against his chest in a silent salute. "Oakhaven's mercy is noted. Rowan remembers. God be with you." "Wait," Barnaby shouted. The nobleman. Rowan froze, his expression turning ice cold. He threw a dark look at his men and walked away, head hanging in shame. In these conflicts, I knew their fate. I understood the brutal reality for noblemen caught by an angry mob. Once the rebels vanished, Barnaby exploded with rage. He laid into everyone a massive wall and not one damn guard. No sentries, no watchfires, nothing but darkness. Assassins could have slit your throats while you were dreaming. The elder's face went pale with absolute terror. "Oil is expensive, we're starving. How can we burn our sustenance?" Barnaby scoffed, then start praying masses at dawn. "Ask the Lord, and he'll provide." The manipulation worked perfectly. I got up and headed straight for my kitchen. I grabbed a big jug of sunflower oil from the pantry. I was just going to pour a tiny bit into a cap. Suddenly, Lady Beatrice leaped from the shadows. She pointed a trembling finger at the crowd, screaming bitter, hateful insults. "You filthy heathens, you treat our creator with such disrespect. Even a lowly priest knows that prayer demands a sacrifice. They fast, they cleanse, they ring the bells. You beg for miracles without building a single temple or shrine. No bells, no candles. And you have the gall to beg for mercy. Show some damn respect." The peasants withered under her venomous glare, and the heartbeat. Beatrice seized absolute command of the colony. "Tomorrow everyone wears their finest. Elara must look like a miracle incarnate. Smithy, forget about sleep. Forge a massive bronze ringer by dawn. We're performing the high rite." I nearly choked on a laugh, oil can trembling. Their fanatical obsession with the divine was making my life incredibly easy. Usually, their tiny squeaks were so quiet I'd miss them. I could hear a damn thing they said. But a massive bell, that's basically a high-volume push notification from heaven. I set the sunflower oil aside, smirking. "Fine, no treats tonight. Let's see what kind of theater they stage tomorrow morning." I capped the bottle, leaned back, and watched the orange embers glow inside my glass-walled universe. That custom craftsman was worth every cent. Let's see how loud a prayer can actually get. A deafening metallic roar ripped me from my dreams the next morning. It sounded like a car wreck in a tunnel. I rubbed my eyes and peered into the glass. My God, all 48 tiny souls were lined like a platoon of toy soldiers. Beatrice had styled Elara like a martyr in a Renaissance painting, dressed in white linen and petals. She stole the show. If this were Hollywood, talent scouts would be murdering each other to sign her. She raised a wooden cup, toasted the ceiling, and poured a drop onto the parched earth. Kneeling, she muttered a frantic Latin plea before screaming at my ceiling fan. "This wretch begs the creator for his name." I yawned and whispered, "Silas." Beatrice looked like she'd been struck by lightning. To her, it was the voice of a mythic prophet. She hit the mud, howling all glory to Silas. The mob followed, frantically crossing themselves and collapsing. "Great, I'm a deity now." Elara kept the pitch going. "We need light to keep the monsters away. We beg for the Lord's oil." I grabbed the sunflower grease, filled a plastic cap, and lowered it into their world. From their view, it was a 10-foot lake of shimmering liquid gold. A heavy, fatty stench filled the air. That Morin Garrick stood there with his jaw on the floor. He was about to dive in until the elder sent him flying with a brutal kick. I would tolerate a riot. I needed an enforcer. I gave the reins to Barnaby, a man who loved power. This town needed his iron fist. I moved quickly, dropping giant white flower boulders like bombs. "Buy their souls with these," I told him. Barnaby was surgical, cold, and utterly efficient. He pulverized the white orbs into fine mist. We packed the dust into heavy, coarse burlap sacks. He marched into the ruins where the outlaws hid. Those places were graveyards for the starving. At dusk, he returned like a king. 102 walking skeletons followed him home. Their skin was a shin, their eyes hollow. The population surged. Barnaby's reign of terror began immediately. He barked the new laws until he went hoarse. Blacksmiths get double flour rations daily. Masons, build a temple for your savior. Erect the sanctuary of Silas right now. They needed a myth to stay productive. I lifted the lid and leaned my face in. I stared down like a mute, terrifying titan. Elara's voice shook as she briefed the stone carvers. She turned me into a flawless legend. The clay statue was handsome, regal, and a complete lie. It was a 30% improvement on my real face. Their artistry was hauntingly perfect. I had an idea and pulled up my monitor. I printed a 3-centimeter warrior gripping a holy blade. I dropped it in, carved this exactly. I ordered 101. Match this king. We were almost done when the real world screamed. Sheriff Derek arrived and he was hunting. He had 100 broken deputies at the gate. They tracked a runner named Rowan to my door. These men were cornered wolves looking for blood. They wanted a place to burn down. Then they saw my glowing, vibrant walls. A massive, neon fortress rose from the dust. They froze in the shadow, something impossible. What kind of sorcery is this? The sheriff gasped. Rowan's band of misfits had suddenly evolved. Barnaby, that silver-tongued devil, feigned total blindness with a smirk. Forgive me, sire. But what wall? Just a simple camp, Barnaby lied. Derek drew his steel at the plastic blocks. You take me for a fool. Look at these monoliths. Nobody could miss a barricade this colossal. I grinned from my perch, shoving my phone screen flush against the heavy glass. I pulled up a blood-curdling horror movie shriek and maxed the volume. I hit play. That jagged wail shattered the air. Derek dropped his blade, paralyzed by sheer primal dread. His soldiers bolted, mimicking their leader's east fear. They turned toward the gnarled woods. Now or never. I reached inside like a deity, yanking the plastic fortifications and structures out of sight. I scooped up the well in the shed. Within 10 seconds, the entire settlement was a void. Derek scanned the woods, then turned. He went rigid as if electrocuted, gasping for air. The fortress gone. Where the hell did it go? It was right here. Barnaby's grin turned wicked, looking like he'd been overtaken by some prehistoric demon. Sir, the chase has snapped your sanity. Wood witches have clouded your eyes. There's nothing but dirt here. Come rest your weary head, Barnaby laughed. While Derek gawked at the trembling locals, the peasants wept, praying for salvation. The phantom shriek haunted Derek's mind. This land is unholy. God save us. He vaulted on his mount and fled, his men howling behind him. As they vanished, I worked fast. The plastic houses and walls descended from the sky again. Every piece hit the ground with a dull throb. The newcomers fell, worshipping the dust. I owned them. Days later, it hit 104. The sun scorched the laborers. One guy dropped, foaming and feverish. I lunged for my kitchen freezer. I broke off a frozen splinter and filled a small cap with chilled cola. I set it down in the village square. A dark lake formed around a massive iceberg. It's black and boiling. Elara shrieked. The Lord's holy elixir heals all. The crowd swarmed, drinking deep. Carbonated fire exploded in their guts. The village lost its mind. One guy, faking his exhaustion, dove toward the liquid. He gulped it like wildfire. Big Garrick was obsessed. He grabbed his axe, climbed the peaks, and harvested wood like a madman. He didn't want food, just that black syrup. I smiled. I used a syringe to fill his bowl with dark froth. By sunset, the twins presented their flawless ranger carving. It was a masterpiece. I used a pipette to drop industrial dye to them. Those tiny drops looked like immense, glowing orbs. Modern pigments shame their dull reasons. The finished figure looked disturbingly alive. His armor gave off a cold, metallic sheen. I pocketed the half-inch carving and sped to the hobby store. Old Kai looked through his glass and froze. This is some insane microengineering. He posted macro photos online for $8,888 in 5 minutes. A rich European bought it. Kay cursed himself for pricing it so low, then messaged the buyer. Soon a ping Silas, a whale wants a 1mm archangel for $1 million. He wanted it for a necklace to flip at auction. My heart hammered as I saw the zeros. Take it, close the deal. 1mm. Impossible for a human, but my tiny workers just had to carve a 6-foot statue in their scale. I was a god with a bank account. I bought the finest pork cuts money could buy. Back home, I dropped a massive slab of meat into their square. A mountain of marbled protein fell. Eat up, I boom, double portions for everyone. The artists get the rest. The town went wild. The carvers wept and hugged. Massive haunches of venison, dwarfing the skeletal men around them, were prepped. They wiped tears through layers of filth, lighting a frantic blaze in the grove to smoke the meat. The thick, savory perfume of sizzling fat rolled through the camp, hitting those starving refugees like a bolt of lightning. That is the human condition in a nutshell. Nobody fights until they see a way out. Amidst the swirling ash and orange light, a miniature stone cathedral finally stood finished. St. Silas was a done deal. I leaned forward, etching at a good look at that tiny sanctuary. It was time to see what kind of desperate faith these fanatics were cooking up in my name. It was 13:15, the night before the big harvest. The locals put on their cleanest rags and fell into stiff, Perfect rose. Elara didn't flinch in the baking heat, dressed in flowing whites and wearing heavy war paint, bowing before the town's pride and joy, holding the gold cup tight. She raised a glass to the heavens and sanctified the dust below. After a rough, shaky prayer, she gave the signal with a sharp flick of her wrist. Ring it, clang, clang, clang. The deep, metallic boom rippled through the valley. Honestly, those two smiths couldn't make a decent chest plate if their lives depended on it, but they hit a home run with this bell. The mob pressed inward to get inside, pressing their lips to my statue's cold iron feet and muttering their darkest secrets. An old, shriveled farmer begged for blue skies and overflowing siles this year. I had to laugh. Since the forecast was literally my job, I whispered to Elara, "Tell him it is a lock." The geezer sprinted out, losing his mind with joy, screaming to the world that God was listening. After 3 years of hell, we can finally farm. Suddenly, the whole line went feral, their eyes turning red as they mobbed the altar. "God, please, just a little more food for my kids." I just gave a lazy wave. "You got it. It is a promise. If I have to, I will just toss some miracle grow in the fields later on." But right when things got spiritual, that snake Barnaby crawled up to my image, looking over his shoulder. "Lord, I need a hand. I want to be built like a stallion below the belt. If you catch my drift." My face turned to stone. "Tell him to beat it before I turn him into a grease spot." Fighting back a smirk, Elara booted him. Barnaby scrambled away in a cold sweat, and the village roared with laughter. But as the energy peaked, the sentry up top started beating the alarm like a drum. "We have got trouble. There is a mob at the gates." I straightened up and looked into the basin. From where I sat, I could only see about 500 yards past the walls, but from the top of the stone battlements, they could see for miles. All at once, a violent, high-stakes chase burst into view. A terrified wave of families, hugging their children, ran for their lives. Their cries for help filled the air as they scrambled to survive. Right behind them was a pack of cold-blooded woodsmen. Wielding rusty hatchets and sharpened steel, they closed the distance. Metal flashed in the sun as they butchered anyone who lagged behind. People dropped into the mud as blood painted the trail. My people had never seen a bloodbath like this. They just stood there, frozen. Barnaby barked out a command. "Wake up and get strapped. Grab your lids, your forks, and your wood axes right now. Get your butts on the wall this second." A lone wagon led the charge, racing toward the main entrance. A guy in a fancy velvet coat sat at the reins, panicking. "For God's sake, open the doors and let us in." Barnaby peered over the edge and spotted the man. "Lord Eldrick, crank that winch. Get the doors open. Move it." The huge gates were barely cracked when the wagon came flying through. But those terrified refugees were being hunted. Bumper to bumper, the murderers were close enough to feel their breath. Keeping the doors open was an invitation for a complete slaughter inside. Barnaby was soaking in sweat, caught in a nightmare choice. Close the gates, and those poor souls outside get butchered. Leave them open, and the town gets torched. I just gave a crooked grin. "Since I am here, we done teen a tragedy today." I sucked in enough air to pop my chest and faced the mud outside. I let out a massive gust that hit like a Category 5 storm. A wall of dirt kicked up, creating a blinding sandstorm. A heavy veil of dust choked the road between the two groups. The killers went blind instantly, flailing through the thick haze. The families just had to tuck their heads and keep moving. Within 12 seconds, they had made enough distance to get clear. The last of them dove inside, and the gate slammed shut. The Viscount fell out of his wagon, gasping for breath. He smeared the dirt off his face, his chest still pounding. My estate is a pile of ash, torched by those insurgents, and that was just the scouts. Thousands more on their way. Barnaby went stiff. 1,000? Where the hell is the king? The Viscount spat in the dirt. The king is useless. The High Command expects you people to just die off by spring. They are not sending a single soul to save us. Garrick, the village heavy, stood there with his mouth open. He looked around like a trapped animal and dropped a heavy curse. "If we are just meat for the grinder, maybe I will go row." Elara cracked him across the jaw. "Pull yourself together. Divine intervention or just bad luck." The floor suddenly tilted. Pure bedlam erupted. This raider boss waved a gigantic steel cleaver, howling at the fortifications who left this wreckage. "You have exactly 60 minutes to fork over 10 bags of wheat. If we kick in these doors, nothing stays breathing." The noble, playing it safe, hissed a frantic plea. "Suicide is not a strategy. If there is bread, hand it over. 10 measly sacks to ensure our lives. Charge it to my account." My sergeant tuned him out, waiting for my nod. I looked down at those emaciated, desperate scavengers. I let out a jagged laugh. "Scout, give them the word that mercy is off the table." She inhaled deeply, focusing her resolve. "The Creator commands unconditional defiance." The captain bellowed, lifting his massive blade, cackling like a lunatic. "Bingo, no quarter given." 100 locals hit the dirt together, praising the heavens and chanting, not one drop of mercy. The deafening shout shook the atmosphere, stunning the criminals past the perimeter. The Count was paralyzed. He gripped my man. "Is this some twisted black sorcery? What holy man says that?" My guy just grinned. "Remember that dust storm, that holy gust? That was a miracle. The truth finally dawned on him, and he started shaking. Seeing the town hold the line, I realized these rookies needed some heavy-duty firepower. I spun around and bolted down the stairs, tearing toward the hobby store across the street. I found a bucket of miniature plastic launchers buried in a corner. They were only about 3 centimeters long, using basic tension coils. The cost, $1 per piece, the clerk said. 50 for 25. I swiped my card. Back in the diorama, the whole town was digging in, boiling tar, stacking stones. I found my voice measure. Tell them the cargo arrive. Their upgrades are in. Every soul froze, staring up at the ceiling with religious fervor. The noble figured they had finally snapped, and readying a snarky comment, snatching a small green plastic engine, I reached through the mist and set it down. From the Count's view, the heavens cracked, dropping a 20-foot wide neon war machine right onto the landscape. It slammed into the ground like a meteor. Debris filled the air. The noble's jaw practically hit his boots. My sacred launcher, this build, this structure, heavenly wrath in the flesh. The girl ordered her blacksmith. Get your hammer. Watch the mechanism strike when I say. I picked up a stone, a boulder to those little people, and loaded the payload. Smash them. The smith swung his iron maul, pulverizing the plastic release. Snap. The arm whipped up, throwing the projectile into the air with a violent crack. That stone ripped through the wind, whistling across the sky, clearing the walls before impacting. Boom. It crushed a raider into a crimson smear. As it tumbled, it mowed a bloody path through the enemy lines. Thugs scattered, wailing like banshees or trapped animals. My people roared. This defense was devastating. I grinned, having a blast. Let's just escalate. I snatched more toy engines, deploying them along the ridge. 20 death dealers were primed for action. A bright spectrum of neon artillery stood finished. The aristocrat collapsed, his knees knocking, pleading for pity, while worshipping my name. At dusk, the real threat showed up. A massive scream rose from the cardboard outskirts. The main raider army, 1,000 deep, swarmed across the rug. Despite their hunger, these veterans were vicious, radiating pure malice. Their warlord hoisted his sword, screaming at the clouds. Break the doors, steal their grain. 1,000 devils charged ahead with scaling jeer and rams. My small citizens stood terrified. The chieftain waved his iron, standing atop the rocks. Fire at will. The crew slammed their hammers, releasing the coiled energy of 20 plastic springs. Crack red. 20 heavy rocks lit up the darkness, falling like meteors. Smash, smash, smash. On contact, the ground turned into a slaughterhouse. Bad guys fell like wheat during the harvest. The vanguard surged through the bombardment, hitting the base of my toy fort. They scrambled up the ramparts. My brave guards fought back, swapping arrows as the enemy shot high. Dozens of projectiles whistled past the parapets. Seeing my people bleed gutted me, so I intervened. High on the walls, a storm of arrows pelted me like hail on a metal shed. Those razor-sharp heads struck my palm. They couldn't even nick the surface. Every shot just ricocheted off, useless against a hide that was 200 times tougher than steel. It was the perfect wall, a literal living shield of skin that nothing could pierce. To the terrified invaders below, my hand was invisible, leaving them completely rattled. They panicked, certain the city's very stones were under the protection of some ancient holy power. From the towers, we dumped a flood of boiling, bubbly vegetable oil. That scalding liquid soaked the attackers, turning their battle cries into high-pitched screams of pure agony. In all the chaos, a rogue captain scaled the wall and jumped onto the walkway. The guy was a total nightmare in studded leather, just oozing raw violence. A scared local tried to poke him with a pitchfork, but that heavy armor didn't even dent. With a nasty sneer, the thug snapped the wooden handle with one mean backhand. He spun around fast, charging at Garrick with a blade thirsty for blood. Caught off guard, Garrick braced himself as that heavy steel slammed right into his chest. A loud metallic ring filled the air as sparks flew across the stone. But thanks to the top-tier plate armor I'd made, Garrick didn't feel a damn thing. The thug froze, then growled, trying to slice Garrick's throat next. My heart raced seeing my best officer in such a tight spot. Nobody touches my people. I reached in, snatching an empty space with perfect aim. I pinched that vibrating steel right out of the air. The heavy sword stopped cold, stuck mid-swing in my grip. The bandit pushed until his veins almost popped, but the blade wouldn't move an inch. To anyone watching, it looked like the sword was welded to thin air. Elara's voice broke the noise. Garrick, the Lord's got him pinned. Finish it now, take him down while he is trapped. Snapping out of it, Garrick grabbed his huge axe with a new kind of rage. He swung hard enough to drop an entire forest. Like a one-man wrecking crew, the heavy edge bit in deep, cutting through leather and bone like a hot knife through butter. The bandit dropped in a pile of smashed armor and blood. Dead before he hit the ground, covered in red, Garrick raised his axe and let out a wild, primal roar. The Lord is our wall outside. The enemy boss finally saw the tide had turned. His big invasion was gone. 1,000 guys turned into a broken, scattered mess. My guns had turned his lines into a graveyard, sending the survivors running for their lives. He stood alone with only a few bleeding, terrified stragglers left behind. Run, get out before we were all dead. His tough guy act vanished as he turned and bolted for the trees. The Viscount grabbed a bow. Seeing a shot end this for good, he narrowed his eyes, aiming for the runner's back, and let it fly. He missed by a mile. The arrow went way off target. A weird, heavy silence hit the walls as as the shaft just thudded into the dirt. "You can't run," I whispered. I held my hand over the horizon, following his path. I spread my fingers and slammed my palm down hard. The sky groaned as the air buckled under the pressure. The ground exploded. A massive, 5-fingered hole smashed into the mud outside the gates. The impact flattened the leader instantly, leaving only a giant handprint in the dirt. His inner circle just vanished without a sound, smashed into a red stain right in the middle. Then a heavy, suffocating silence took over. The dust cleared to show a massive holy crater. Fear beat out pride. The Viscount threw away all his dignity. Falling over, he pulled his wife and shaking kids down, frantically making signs of the cross. Heavenly anger, pure holy fire at the peak of their praying, while sparks of gold light floated up like embers from every single soul. Over 300 glowing dots rose through the air, merging into the glass case of my little world. Suddenly, the screen flashed with a blinding holy light. 5 buttons appeared on the frame: east, west, south, north. Next, center. Next to them, glowing text read, "Score 325. Panic hit me. My heart hammered like a drum. Shaky. I hit east. The little map moved left, showing new horizons as the mist cleared, adding 500 meters of land. I clicked north, and the view zoomed toward the dark woods where Garrick was working. That's when I got it. Saving lives meant getting more power. I smiled, my hands shaking with excitement as I zoomed back to town. In the ruins, a soldier yelled as hot oil cooked his skin, leaving him in agony. I grinned, reaching for a tube of expensive antibiotic ointment. I squeezed out a tiny drop, smaller than a speck. Time for another miracle from their kind silent master. Holding that tiny bit on my fingertip, I moved down toward the believers below, laughing. Now that I see how this works, I'm gonna play God in this dark, medieval hell. To me, this was nothing, but to Elara, as she looked up with wide, terrified eyes, it was a massive white tower from the stars. The smell was too much. She lunged, barely catching the holy weight before it hit the floor. Strong Lady Beatrice jumped in to help, her moves fueled by a religious panic. The holy drink moved fast. Get the silver cup. We need a sacred bowl for this. Carefully, she put the cream into the silver, sealing it up with wax. She only let Elara use the tiny bit left on her skin to fix the soldier's nasty blisters, coldly efficient, total ice. The guard gasped, but moments after I applied the salve, his agony vanished into a cool, numbing shiver. His sores healed as he gripped his cross in tearful relief, while Lord Eldrick stood there, completely stunned. He was speechless. He had always trashed my work as some shoddy, back-alley pagan hustle. But a miracle had arrived. Curing him instantly, overwhelmed by duty and shock, he collapsed into the dirt. Night fell hard. I summoned my inner circle, Barnaby, Lady Beatrice, and the church reps. Flickering candles cast long shadows as my voice cut through the gloom, echoing across the grand chamber. This mission is a heavy burden, but a noble one. I'll save mankind, but I only defend the loyal. For the cruel and wicked, I bring holy fire. I do not hesitate. Eliminating monsters keeps the good people safe. The Viscount was shivering, so I gave him his orders. Look, Viscount, head home at dawn. Check your cart. Eldrick tripped toward the door, racing for the yard. He yanked the cover back and gasped. The entire cargo bay was stuffed with giant premium dope balls. Use this grain, save your village, and rebuild. The nobleman knelt under the starlight, swearing his life to me. I had him right where I wanted him. Then I looked at the lady. Bring me the bottles. I'll have the medicine ready by morning. Get to the poor and start fixing those shattered, hungry lives. Remember, we preserve life to create, not to destroy. The woman shook, her eyes lit with religious intensity. She gave her word, promising total allegiance. At sunrise, the 3 nobles left in their loaded-down carriage. White dust flew everywhere as they bounced over the trail. By arrival, they looked like 3 ghostly apparitions. Using my food supplies and his secret family stash, Eldrick wasted no time recruiting a private army. The estate began to flourish again. Back in Oakhaven, I looked on as Barnaby chewed out his blacksmiths. He was breathing down their necks. It's been 2 weeks. Those raiders are right outside our doorstep. Only 2 sets of armor. Are you lazy or stealing rations? Cedric looked crushed. Sir, please, you must understand. Steel isn't enough for protection. A soldier needs padding under the plate. Otherwise, the metal shreds their skin. We were completely out of fabric, no cloth. Well, that's an easy fix for a deity like me. I dug around my closet until I found a raggedy jacket. I plucked a bit of cotton from a rip. I let it fall into the void of their miniature realm. To them, a snowy peak was falling from heaven. It slammed down by the shop, rattling the ground. Barnaby lunged into the fluff, screaming with pure wild ecstasy. Holy thread, it's perfect, it's infinite, a miracle. As I observed them, a profound thought took root. Even with the size shift, the fibers were still workable. They could weave it. My junk was their salvation. The container didn't just transport items, it transformed them. The size became massive, but the core material stayed intact. The local women went wild, scrambling for the wool. They battled over every piece, imagining warmth and easy money. Beatrice had 48 hours until she headed for the trade hub. She intended to preach in that den of thieves. Barnaby sat in the dust, looking defeated. My kid needs schooling, but no teacher would step foot in this dump. Luring a professor to this marsh is impossible. Those snobby intellectuals think they were way too good for us. They 1T trade their dignity for some wheat. But everyone has a price. I grabbed a necklace from my desk. It was a pure 999 silver piece from my youth. I cut one link using heavy-duty snips. It landed with a thunderous thud, giant silver disc. It stood over Barnaby like a glowing monument of riches. The reflection was blinding, searing the eyes of everyone nearby. Let's see if his pride survives a massive payout. Barnaby swallowed hard, muttering that this would do the trick. I chopped the silver into chunks the size of heads. Bribe him with this if he refuses once. Throw down another chunk. Crush his resolve with pure wealth. If he still says no, he's an idiot. Just leave. I bet he'll be begging at your feet by dinner. Barnaby dropped to his face, shouting thanks to his hidden god. At sunrise, he headed out with his family. 12 guards followed, dragging the massive silver haul. They left Oakhaven behind, trekking into the scorched, violent badlands. Beyond the walls lay a hellscape of slaughter and flames. They walked for miles while a sense of doom grew. The forest seemed to whisper. Suddenly, 100 outlaws flooded the trail, circling them with unsheathed swords and lethal intent. Beatrice gripped the silver cup, her hands shaking. Garrick pulled his sword, sweat blurring his vision as the circle tightened. I stifled the panic, straightened my spine, and hollered, I serve the monarchy, lay a finger on us and the law will end you. The scarred butcher just sneered, I've already gutted the High Baron. A desk jockey does to rattle me. I scrambled for a getaway plan. I spotted a vulnerability. You boys run with Rowan. Yeah, what if we do? I'm his associate. I bluffed with cold steel in my voice. Rowan and I are practically kin. Hurt me, and he will literally peel the hide from your carcass. The thug wavered, paralyzed by a sudden seed of doubt. Suddenly, a thunderous shout split the mountain air. Sheathe your blades. Rowan stomped into view with heavy, rhythmic steps. He grinned, well, look at that, the Oakhaven refugees. Hiking through a combat zone with all that gear. You've got guts. The leader broke into a sweat and dragged his crew away. Rowan kept his word, guiding us to the town's perimeter. The moment we hit the safe zone, my stamina evaporated and I hit the ground. I collapsed into the dirt, thanking every deity for our lives. The trek was silent. Rowan parted ways with us 3 miles out. He scheduled a sunrise meeting. I led the group toward the main gates. The sentries' faces turned bone white. They looked ready to drop the iron portcullis in a sheer panic. My lord Barnaby, is that truly you? Weren't you slaughtered by a forest hag? It clicked then. These cowards were the ones who abandoned Oakhaven during the siege. That witch's scream had shattered their courage. I was howling internally but kept my expression as hard as flint. I gestured toward the sky. Ghosts don't cast shadows. Only the guilty fear spirits in broad daylight. I was just saving my wife. The smoke has cleared. Now unlock the gate. The 2 guards looked up at the midday sun. They saw my silhouette on the stones and gulped. They granted us entry. I moved my wife into the local convent. While she distributed medicine, I headed for the city's east end. I had one final errand to run on this trip. I required a teacher to educate our entire village. In a crumbling attic, I discovered a starving academic named Eamon. Dressed in rags, he shook his head violently. The prospect of that desolate wasteland clearly terrified the man. The world is on fire. I'm staying with my pupils. We intellectuals have pride. We aren't tea for sale. I won't tea trade my soul for crumbs. I lean back and smirk. Bread isn't tea the payment I'm offering. I grabbed my wire cutters and snapped off a silver fragment. I casually tossed the metal into his cup. Then boom. A massive silver brick slammed onto the wood. The heavy metal shook the scholar's decaying desk. Eamon's vision swam and his knees buckled. His eyes practically popped out of his skull. I told him it was a hazard bonus for his trouble. Take the gift and pay your students. The old man tried to preserve his ego. Not a chance. I reached for the heavy metal shears. Crack. A massive slab of silver dropped from above. Boom. 2 mountains of silver now sat before him. Eamon's pride evaporated. He screamed his total loyalty. I'm in. My delivery arrived later that afternoon. I hauled the massive crate toward the diorama. Inside sat a custom, one-of-a-kind steel fortress. It measured nearly 2 feet across, a massive beast of timber and reinforced steel plating. Steel walls divided the dark interior rooms. Electric motors and rubber wheels were hidden beneath the chassis. The fort contained over 200 rooms. My $2,000 project looked absolutely lethal. I keyed the remote to test the mechanics. Everything moved flawlessly. The machine was alive. I pulled back the glass and took a deep breath. Elara, spread the word. We have work to do. Clear 50 yards in the town square immediately. She screamed, sending the panicked masses running. The tiny people huddled in terror. I reached down and pinched a miniature house. I yanked it out like a weed. Whoosh! They watched their home fly into the clouds. It sailed through the air on an arch. It touched down safely miles away. Then I reached for the next one. I cleared the center of the board. Even their new shrine was snatched away in an instant. I set it on my desk as a souvenir. I began lowering the massive star fort to position. Shadows grew as the steel monolith descended. A 100-meter fortress blotted out the sun. It hit the mud with an earth-shaking thud. The gravity of this world felt heavy today. The tires looked out of place, so I masked them. I dug 2 deep ruts with one finger. I buried the wheels deep in the soil. I packed the dirt until it looked natural. Perfect. The village gazed up at the fallen god. Their primitive minds broke at the impossible sight. I felt my sanity snap as I ordered every couple of private room. I told them to build their own homes. A heavy hush preceded a deafening roar. It is a miracle, they hollered. Praise be to our savior. Silas. Famished souls flooded the great keep like ghosts. It was a mad dash for land as everyone fought for space. Young Garrick came back from the fields looking lost. Seeing his folks lugging furniture finally made the situation click. He actually had a roof. A massive grin broke. Elara, ever the opportunist, stepped into the fray to lead. Garrick, the master gives you 5 pounds of sugar plus 50 pounds of meat and flour. Go buy a wife. Overflowing with adrenaline, he grinned ear to ear. He practically pleaded with his mom to start scouting for girls. By daybreak, the scholar Eamon began his tenure. A bit of silver had bought his loyalty for the job. He stared at the mountain of flour, oil, and meat. The sheer volume made his knees buckle right then. The pay was divine. Clutching his manuscripts, he watched as a wave of kids swarmed the courtyard for class. Elara and the students waited in heavy silence. He cleared his throat, ready to teach them about ancient traditions. Hold it, Elara cut in. The master requires a ritual, a sunrise drill to toughen up your soft frames. Eamon went rigid, training. What academy is this? He stammered. Is this some bizarre, modern way of thinking? Elara pointed toward the heavens, witnessed the master's vision. I angled my smount screen directly over the high spire. A thumbprint ignited the display. Blinding light hit them as a massive glowing portal ripped through the very sky. 100 feet of neon light hung in the clouds. A lady in tight spandex appeared, screaming out encouragement. Aggressive techno beats vibrated through the earth. 1, 2, 3, 4. The giantess bellowed from the firmament above. Keep breathing. Squat. Elara yelled at the crowd. Follow the divine spirit. Do exactly what she does now. The town began to sway in a rhythmic heap. They swung their limbs around, chasing the electric patterns. Bodies slammed into each other as the bass pounded. It was pure insanity. Eamon looked on, his logic crumbling. That miraculous moving image shattered his world. None of the old books ever mentioned this sorcery. He whispered softly. He begged the universe for forgiveness, but his muscles moved anyway. He slowly began to sink into a squat. Peace lasted 2 days, then chaos. I was inhaling ramen and soda when my security sensor let out a wail. From the high walls, a sentry scream cut the air. A battered shape emerged from the woods, soaked in blood. I switched the camera to wide view. A rag man was dragging himself before falling down the slope in gore. The man slammed into the iron doors and collapsed. Garrick pulled him in, while Barnaby looked pale as death. I recognized one-eyed Pete from the last job. Red foam bubbled around his mouth as he fought for air. Barnaby, save us. He croaked through the gore. Gordon's crew is planning to burn Oakhaven to the ground tonight. Rowan put up a fight, but he didn't stand a chance. Those animals carved him up in the dark woods. The attack is coming now. They were nearly here. A crushing stillness gripped the room as every heart skipped beats. Barnaby turned ashen. Get your weapons, he roared. Chaos exploded as people ran around like cornered, terrified animals. Walls are great by day, but night fights are massacres. Barnaby took charge. Garrick, go run to the manor. Tell the Viscount he needs to lead. Dante slowed down. Garrick snatched some bread and vanished into the void. The kid ran for miles, his chest feeling like hot coals. He tore through a 4-hour trick with wings. The Viscount didn't hesitate. Once he heard about the threat to Oakhaven, he had the war horses ready instantly. Garrick held on for life as the world turned into a blur. They galloped like demons, arriving before dawn. The nobleman stepped inside and froze. Mesmerized, the layered defense towers and strategic bottlenecks were absolute tactical perfection. The good heavens, this place is a masterpiece of lethal efficiency. He scanned the horizon with a very practiced eye. We are not just defending, he snapped. We were flipping the script. Sitting ducks die. We bait the wolves in. Open the front doors wide. Let those thugs walk into their graves. We plan to use corridors as kill boxes. We will box them in like stray curs and finish them. Every stone is a weapon. No survivors left. The defense was solid except for one glaring hole. A narrow path sat open, a death trap with 0 guards. From my desk, I could see the impending doom. I gave the tiny landscape a wicked grin, lacking heat. Hub. I clicked my Zippo open. Elara saw the flame and knew clear out. She screamed, the master brings fire. Clutching the metal lighter, I prepared to set the sky ablaze. I lowered the flame toward the tiny fort's heart. A grotesque, colossal bronze barrel spanned several meters, plunging from the sky to choke off their only path out. It landed without a sound. The death trap is set. Keep 10 meters clear. Summon those blacksmiths and their heaviest sledges to smash the firing. Pin Cedric and Bran white-knuckled their forging hammers. They braced beside the lever. 1, 2, 3. They swung with every ounce of muscle, slamming the steel home. A piercing metallic ring signaled the hammer strike. Boom, the nozzle erupted, vomiting a monstrous purple inferno. A solar intensity heat wave surged forth. 10-foot flames shrieked like a ravenous dragon, scurrying the corridor clean. The scorching, skin-melting blast forced the Count to scramble back 8 desperate paces. He let out a jagged laugh, knowing this divine engine would incinerate everyone. Beyond the chaos, the darkness loomed heavy. I slumped in my chair, chewing on a greasy wing while staring at the live monitor. Suddenly, my phone shrieked with a high-pitched alert. Beep, beep, beep. Something had triggered the sensors inside the enclosure. Just as I had anticipated, I tossed my food aside and hovered over the tiny landscape dioramas on my workstation. I flipped the northern toggle, focusing the macro camera on the ridge where plastic trees cast eerie silhouettes. Gordon and Bullock emerged at last, commanding 200 rapacious, miniature outlaws hungry for loot. They slithered through the gloom toward my tabletop village, scurrying like a pack of famished rodents. I smirked, clicking off the safety and readying my custom igniter to dump 10,000 volts into the toy battlements. Walk right in, betrayers, you just bought yourselves a world of hurt. Let us call down some heavenly thunder, a true wrath of God moment. I killed the overheads. I scanned the screens as the alert chirped once more. The captains and their hordes scurried like insects toward my ramparts. Bullock tossed a grappling line, ascending the 30-foot wall with practiced speed. He fancied himself an invisible phantom, but I tracked his every move through the miniature castle slits. My hidden marksmen kept him in their sights as he slipped through and through the deadbolt. The invasion force poured into the courtyard, sweeping through like a flood until 1,000 sparks ignited above them. Eldrick lay in wait, perched on high. The knight drew his steel with a cinematic sweep. He opened his mouth for some grand, useless speech, but a hardened local peasant was not having any of his drama. She snatched a jagged rock and pitched it over the edge. Crunch! The raider head popped like a sun-dried melon. Battle horns shrieked from the peaks. The trap snapped shut as boulders and boiling oil rained down. The attackers lost their minds, scrambling like caged mice. One leader bolted only to hit a dead end. A titan clad in heavy plating barred the way, his massive axe carving out their final moments. Trapped, the bandits jammed into the final choke point, huddled together and shaking in the dark. A pair of iron workers poised over the trigger with their sledges. 1, 2, 3. Clang, the hammer blow triggered the spark. Roar! A brilliant sapphire stream of flame blasted outward. Blistering heat consumed the hallway, whitewashing everything. The vanguard vanished before they could even draw breath to scream. They transformed into living pyres, illuminating the dark tunnel as the stench of scorched meat rose. Watching the fire hit its zenith, I extended a single finger and shoved the metal housing forward. The hulking bronze cylinder vibrated, spitting a curtain of fire that shattered the invaders' will. They broke down, crying and wetting themselves while praying for mercy. Kill them all. No, that is bad business. I choked the fuel line, and the commander called for surrender. Every prisoner was now destined for the labor pits. They would work off their debt. I reached for my bricks. Click, click, snap. I snapped together a plastic pen on the dusty floorboards and herded the survivors inside, their first task. Interring their tiny fallen, when the dust settled, the commander rode into the mountain shelf. As night fell, he discovered the broken hero bleeding in the grit. I dusted a bit of healing powder over his wounds. From their view, it was divine snow falling from the sky. The wounds closed up and healed on the spot. Science won another round against primitive superstition. The guy came to but turned his nose up at my help. He disappeared into the shadows, ego intact, real tough guy. 2 days later, the delivery truck pulled up. Another 1 to 200 miniature figures arrived. I tossed a yellow bus onto the concrete floor of the basement. My chrome beast dwarfed the gate. A steel demon landed. Elara yelled, "The Lord calls." Enter the steel wagon, behold the miracle. Garrick's fools crowded into the plastic shell. I tapped the bumper with one finger. The tiny bus went airborne. Medieval mud sprayed. Physics failed them. They had never felt modern, raw torque before. G-forces crushed them. They begged for mercy. Incredible. This iron beast outruns the storm. I filmed the absolute carnage on my phone. A giant hand moving their world. Shoving a bus of terrified tiny people. 1400 Air Street Racing. Filter. Vivid. Caption, the Almighty sends a war engine. Peasants feeling their first taste of speed. Thrown into seats by divine force, uploaded to TikTok, then I ate instant noodles. By the last bite, I checked stats. Damn, 100,000 likes fast. Comments went wild. Best tilt shift ever. No CGI. These actors look genuinely terrified. Perfect medieval acting. Please update. Go live. Sell us that castle set. I won that for a sip soda. My reach grew as my ego climbed. 10 more meters won via the clinic. Healing pays. Money and clout were surging. Tiny ones ready for reform. Time for a massive social system reset. The clip of me shifting reality hit 6-figure likes in just a few hours. Pure madness in the comments. Top tier filming. Flawless interaction. The scale's perfect. The little actors look too real. Zero flaws. Time to fleece the sheep. Profit. I'm making this bank. Link in bio. I listed the same plastic toy car below. $49. 10,000 orders. Boom. Pure commission. I didn't even move. $100,000 pure income. Home. My factory guy called me, crying with relief. He was babbling. I cut him off. Forget planes. Start molding catapults and fortresses. Clone their entire world for me. Keep the channel's vibe regardless of the volume. I'll keep chasing the bag until I'm in dead. I stood up, heading toward the model case late at night. Oakhaven was silent. Dim oil lamps burned on the walls while 2 guards struggled to stay awake. I scanned the walls until I saw a small, dark shape climbing the highest spire. It was Elara by day. She was the holy saintess in white silk, faking a divine grace. But in the middle of the night, she had changed back into her old, torn, filthy rags. She looked up, staring at the huge night sky, pouting like a kid, her voice a soft whisper. "Are you busy in heaven, great lord?" She sighed. "Since you're gone, I'll be real, I'm bored to death here." I nearly choked on my drink. Elara wiped her eyes, looking completely crushed. Everyone stops me from doing anything, except posing there like a statue. But I was the wildest kid in the woods. I loved catching frogs and getting dirty. Today, I tried suing some stolen wool, but Lord Barnaby harassed me for hours about keeping up the Holy Angel Act. I'm gonna lose it if this continues. Hearing her quiet crying made my heart ache with guilt. Gently, I lifted the glass off the case and leaned in her world's moonlight. A titanic face suddenly blocked out the entire stars. Elara screamed in fear, jumping back 3 fast steps in a total panic. She collapsed on her knees, shaking like a leaf. "You're great, Lord. You're here. I'm so sorry. I'll never steal again." I lowered my voice to a deep hum. "I'll go get the wool. You have my word." Elara looked up, a spark of pure, wild happiness in her eyes. "Live how you want. Ignore what they say." I stared at her tiny, grave face, saying every word clearly. "Your joy comes first. I don't need you to suffer, just to save my fake holy image." Her eyes welled with tears. She crossed her chest and ran like a happy deer, sprinting down to the storage room. She grabbed a wool pile larger than herself, hid away, and sang while spinning the wheel. By the next morning, as the tiny sun rose, our modern school system officially kicked off. Elara gathered every kid in town, lining them up straight in the main courtyard. The old teacher Eamon held his dusty scroll ready for a boring lecture, but Elara yelled to fall in. "Watch the Lord's divine vision. Start the drills." I turned on my phone, holding it flat over the scene. The massive display flared, a harsh glare, cutting the fog as the 8th routine kicked off. The workout began with deep lunges. 1, 2, 3, 4. The giant screen throbbed with light. A team in tight gear suddenly occupied the 30-meter screen, moving with robotic precision. The tiny villagers froze before attempting to mimic them, failing miserably in their utter confusion. Eamon, the old skeptic, hid behind the crowd even as his muscles twitched to the rhythm. He pumped his chest, following every movement. Breakfast followed. I reached for the powdered goat milk. I stirred in some sugar and added boiling water, filling a tiny plastic cap to the brim. I placed it carefully, a miniature white sea to them. A deep reservoir 5 meters wide emerged. Locals lined up with their wooden mugs. Barnaby gulped his share and smacked his lips loudly. "This nectar is sweeter than wild honey." The king himself would pass out after one sip. Grinning, I pinched a bit of dry powder and dropped it, forming a small snowy peak. "Behold the holy powder, pure life in dust. Just add heat and drink." Barnaby's face turned pale. He stammered, calling it a heavenly gift, while I tossed a colorful English textbook to Eamon. "A divine code for the scholar's eyes." The old man clutched the book, weeping in silence. He kissed the cover, tears soaking the paper as he swore an oath to protect the scripture. Suddenly, the perimeter sirens shrieked. Sheriff Derek arrived leading over 100 armed men. Drenched in sweat, they neared the gate. The coward was still haunted by those phantom screams. Biting his tongue, he finally crawled back, seeing the once colorful barricades had completely vanished. A 30-foot steel fortress loomed instead. Derek trembled as Barnaby waved from the high ramparts. Barnaby acted oblivious while the sheriff panicked. "The Baron needs heads to keep his seat." "Where's Rowan? Where are the rebels?" Barnaby pointed toward the freezing northern slopes. "Those traitors are rotting underground, beneath that rock." But Rowan vanished into the shadows. The men dug like animals, finding the remains I'd scorched to cinders with a bic days ago. The stench was full, but Derek was thrilled, hacking off the burnt bits and bagging them. These charred trophies were his ticket out. He was desperate to leave this creepy outpost immediately. He mobilized his men, charging into the dark mountains after ghosts. Finally, I turned to Barnaby. Barnaby wiped his brow, planning a supply run. In a war zone, walking is a death sentence. Traveling without a ride is just asking for trouble. Horses, training, that's far too primitive. I scrolled through a tech site for a solution. Remote cars were useless. Signals would to reach. If they hit the glass, they'd be trapped. I needed a machine those tiny people could drive. I found a microsolar car on clearance. Only 3 centimeters long, a literal speck of a vehicle. 2.5 centimeters wide, no batteries, it runs on light. If it's sunny, it moves. Darkness kills the engine. I paid for express shipping. It arrived by 3 p.m. I hit the hobby shop. "Kai, I need an upgrade." I dropped the toy. He just squinted. He stared at the tiny thing, asking what to modify on a simple hunk of plastic. I demanded a steering tiller for the driver and a manual sunshade for the roof. He worked all night. By dawn, it was done. The steering and sunroof were tiny and perfect. I sat by the diorama, holding the gift. I leaned over the glass. "Garrick, get out here." The big man emerged with the whole village following as I lowered the tall like God. To them, the sky was literally falling. A 5-meter steel monster dropped from the heavens. It slammed into the mud. 3 meters of terrifying metal with a crystal roof and heavy levers. "Mount up. Today you learn to drive a war chariot." Garrick and his friend used all their strength. They climbed tires taller than themselves. Garrick gripped the steering bar, terrified but ready for battle. His buddy stood by the roof curtain, grinning wildly. He pulled it back, letting sunlight hit panels. The motor roared as the machine began to hum. To me, it crawled. To them, it was lightning. The speedometer crested 60 miles per hour as I breached this arctic world. "Mercy, please." Centrifugal force slammed those 2 fools against the interior as the sudden acceleration caught them off guard. Our 20-foot wide iron beast roared like a cornered wolf, charging the fortress walls with unbridled momentum. We were finished. The locals covered their eyes and began screaming in terror. Before the impact, I grabbed the frame midair. The mechanical predator dangled helplessly, wheels spinning while metallic shrikes echoed through the silence. Paralyzed with fear, those idiots cowered on the floorboards, their bodies trembling violently as they nearly lost control. I shouted, "Wide open means maximum power. Closing it brakes, shift the shade slowly." Bit by bit, I set the machine down. With trembling hands, Garrick cracked the shield. The miniature vessel accelerated to nearly 40 miles per hour with eerie grace. Tearing through the sludge, the simpletons raced across the barren flats, shouting wildly while the farmhands stared in total disbelief. Their joyride lasted until dusk. When the engine flickered out as the last light faded away, the power vanished, leaving them stranded 300 feet from the entrance. The morons just stood there, completely paralyzed. Despite straining with every muscle, the heavy metallic monster refused to move even a fraction of an inch. Fearing bandits, Garrick noticed the chain gang of former soldiers laboring along the distant crest of the hill. "You lot, get down here and heave. I will pay 2 slabs of bacon per person." Silence gripped the ridge for a heartbeat before chaos erupted. 15 convicts charged down the incline like starving hounds. Each man pushed with desperate strength to force the massive machine back toward the safety of the village. 48 hours later, my plan was set. I needed to test if this vessel could breach the invisible wall. I loaded premium seasonings and grains. The mission reached the estate at White Raven Manor. Those clowns piled massive weight into the back, pulled the blinds, and hit 50 miles per hour down the King's Highway. I focused on the glass perimeter. Snap. The vehicle glided through the transparent barrier, disappearing instantly. Success. With those little people driving, my reality had no limits. I staked out a forested hilltop 30 miles from the town. I observed my unit from my post. 100 infantrymen lay hidden in the thickets bordering the primary road. Beneath our position, 200 outlaws marched with smug indifference. Their leader, Iron Hammer, hurled, spat oaths while balancing a sledge. I unsheathed my blade, my fury boiling, destroying the men, reclaiming my honor before the sovereign. "Harold, this is the day you finally answer for your sins. Strike!" I roared, my command echoing. The bowmen pulled back their strings, prepared to rain fire on the valley. A violent roar suddenly surged from the far crest. The earth trembled under the weight of an unnatural, booming vibration. An iron behemoth smashed through the forest, barreling down the incline at 50 miles per hour. It launched like a bolt from above. Inside, Garrick stared at the crowd with pure dread. He shrieked for them to scatter. At that velocity, anyone on foot was already a walking corpse. The 200 outlaws stood motionless. Captivated by the oncoming steel, they watched, frozen, as the mechanical demon approached. The impact was devastating, a complete obliteration. Harold did not even have time to offer a final prayer. The steel grill pulverized him, tossing his frame like a doll. He tumbled 40 feet before slamming into the dirt. Death was immediate, leaving him mangled in the dust. His protectors were scattered like dry autumn leaves. They cartwheeled through the air before hitting the pavement. Only a horrific red stain remained on the highway. Garrick never tapped the brakes. Terror gripped his soul. He buried the pedal, his hands clutching the wheel fiercely. The tires shredded the fallen. He carved a path of gore through the heart of their formation. Amidst a cloud of fumes and debris, the ghostly vessel disappeared along the road. Nothing remained but dazed troops and the moans of the dying. A grim, oppressive quiet fell over the gorge. My hand shook as I gripped my sword, gasping for air. I gazed at the wreckage covering the highway. "Move out!" I finally roared. "The Almighty has smitten them with bolts of holy lightning. Finish them." My men regained their nerve, with their chief gone. The criminals were slaughtered where they stood. My risky play turned into a divine blessing. Triumph was mine. I thanked Providence for the win. 60 minutes later, Ildrick loomed over his domain, bracing against the masonry. His posture screamed entitlement as he scanned the horizon. A guard burst through the door, gasping for air. "Sire, the villagers, they have returned with an iron monster." The ruler peered down as the 2 men collapsed. Shaking, they sobbed like infants, pleading for their lives. "We murdered them," they cried. Eldrick leaned in, eyeing the red smears drying on the metal bumper. Grimy bits of cloth hung from the chassis. With a sneer, the lord pinched a thread, looking disgusted. "This trash belongs to peasants," he muttered. "You only ran over some low-life bandits." Their trembling stopped instantly, replaced by relief. "Thank God. We figured we were headed for the gallows." "Tell us that sooner. We were dying of fear." They started dragging heavy crates of supplies out of the back. Sacks of flour and jars of oil thudded onto the ground. Eldrick traced across, eyeing the riches. He thanked the heavens for this strange, glossy wonder. His fingers grazed the ice-cold steel of the engine housing. The black panels drank the sun, mesmerizing him. A frantic, spiritual energy surged through his veins. He drifted into a daze, barely breathing. "It moves without beasts, fueled by nothing but the sky. It sleeps only when night falls. This is a divine carriage, dropped from the heavens." I grinned, watching the miniature car zip across my monitor. Supply lines established. Time to drag these people into the future. My tabletop empire needed a boost. I thought about tractors, but the late summer heat wave had scorched everything. The ground turned to stone, killing any hope for crops. The little people needed a soak to survive. They needed a savior before the freeze hit. Building plants could wait. They needed a monsoon right now. A standard sprayer would be a disaster. A single bead of water would hit them like a tidal wave. I would wipe out the town in minutes. Instead, I ordered a medical-grade atom atomizer with overnight shipping. The mist is ultra-fine, perfect for a 1 to 200 scale. To them, it feels like a soft, holy rain. I hid the device inside a plastic monster figurine. I taped the nozzle inside its mouth and locked it down. Ready, I hit the power to assume control. Below, a skeletal guy named Lorcan slipped past the walls. A failing artisan, he was desperate for hope. Clutching scraps of bread, he ran toward the neighboring village. The air turned cold, he froze, staring at the sky. A rocky demon materialized in the clouds, its mouth open, spewing a thick, shimmering mist. 3 years of drought finally ended. He screamed, God has finally shown his face. A blessing from above, he sprinted like a madman toward the sudden gray storm. I sat back and tapped the controller, moving the weather as he chased it. The gargoyle soared, the mortal followed. Gasping, he tracked the shifting rain. The town went wild, crowds poured in the dirt, howling with pure joy. They gulped down the falling water. Even the convicts shattered their shackles to join in. People danced like lunatics, then they all hit the deck at once, chanting together, praise Sal as Lorcan stopped cold, grabbing a neighbor by the collar. This is a miracle. Why credit him? The man looked at him with sheer disgust. Fool, the boss called that beast here, we answered to him, not some storm. The sheer weight of Silas's power terrified him. He collapsed into the slush, pleading for safety. I rotated the camera and dispatched the militia. Cedric eyed the stranger with a smirk. An expert builder, exactly the talent I needed. 200 apartments were sitting empty. Glassless frames looked like hollow sockets. This guy was the final component. Elara gave the order. Work, make the parchment. You will get food and housing monthly. He sold himself for a hot plate. Another migrant stepping into my gilded trap. She shut him in a high-end cell. Ma'am, he stuttered. What about the water? I need a reservoir for the pulp. Running out of room, I found a lid. I filled a plastic lid and tossed it. A massive, echoing explosion followed. A giant water tower flattened the square. Lorcan fell, his spirit broken by the impossible sight. Propped on my elbows, I still ruled like a god. I sentenced the guilty clear for us and slave away. The furnaces hummed within hours. A crude pulp factory assembly line was up and running. That package landed Wednesday. The seller shipped a set of antique miniature buildings. Scale 1 to 200 flawless. The storms were relentless. While my captives huddled together in the sludge, trapped in plastic boxes without any lids, time to renovate, I snatched up the stone ruins and popped the top. Thud. 12 medieval cottages with rock chimneys fell from the heavens, thumping into the muck, spraying grit everywhere. That camp, once exposed and miserable, was now a high-class estate. My little felons and the nearby serfs were completely paralyzed. I whispered to Elara, tell them the Overlord is watching. Redemption, 12 souls to a cell. Work your fingers to the bone to earn your release. Right now, surprisingly, the work crew freaked out, sketching holy signs. Toward the clouds, Almighty Master, we cherish our punishment. We beg for more toil. For eternity, we absolutely do. Not want our freedom. Their terror made me smirk. Thinking of quitting, no way. I'll pick a champion and give him a suit and prime ribs. Let the rat race begin. Cut to the town square. This new Lord Charles was losing his grip. The previous ruler was murdered. The silos where bare peasants were chewing on dirt. Taxes were due. A total dead end. That stubborn aristocrat smacked his desk, heading out to shake down the wealthy to cover the king's massive debts. He marched his armored soldiers out, his spirit sinking fast. Most cabins were empty, littered with skeletons. Then he saw a thriving farm. Not a soul was starving. Some were even chubby. A star fort 30 feet high loomed over the hamlet, a citadel fit for a king. Blinded by greed, Charles ordered his men to charge. They pounded the gates, acting like miserable beggars. Barnaby flinched, smelling a rat when he heard the Baron was here. Quick, hide the silver. Bury the magic machines our creator gave us. Keep them out of sight. He grabbed Elara's shaking hand, coaching her on the lie. This guy is heartless. Wear your finest velvet. You'll be the lady of the manor. I'm the butler. Be icy, be distant. Remember, we represent a lineage as old as the earth scorned him. Elara nearly fainted from fright. She felt so small, fake being the master's wife. Me, will our holy cells really allow this theater? Watching from above, their desperate scramble made me laugh. I sent a thought, go on, this will be fun. Fueled by my voice, Elara's panic turned to iron. She became a queen projecting pure, untouchable royal power. She sat on the top floor, on an oak throne. Her stare became as sharp as a winter storm. Charles walked in, his pulse racing. The fort's deadly kill zones had him completely terrified. Stepping into the shrine, he caught his breath. He saw an old stone carving written in Latin. To Silas, our eternal shield. Charles's brain spun. His history studies flashed like a light. Protector, Silas. Are these the lost children of Rome? A secret family surviving 2,000 years in the dark. Good God. I've walked into a mythic bloodline. Their massive wealth finally made a scary kind of sense. Charles felt tiny, his old arrogance turning to dust. Every bit of his petty pride just vanished. He reached the third floor where Elara sat like ice. She stayed silent, letting Barnaby handle the talk. Charles started a pathetic act, crying for the poor. Then he dropped the mask and showed his claws. The locals are famished. Since you are swimming in gold, pay their bill or face a bloody riot. It was a perfect case of cruel moral blackmail. Barnaby looked at Elara, and she looked at me. Guided by my whispers, she gave a slow, cold head shake. I laughed. He wants a bribe. Tell him to go to hell. The state gets nothing, not a single copper penny. We'll provide the grain, but we'll deliver it ourselves. Barnaby smirked, loving the look on the official's face. I called his bluff hard. Chuck cracked. He pleaded innocence, but Barnaby just grinned. Who's guarding the vault? The city snobs forgot we even exist. You're a broke nobody. Stop faking. Chuck went stone still. I found his nerve. Barnaby leaned in. Quit the grift. Call your big shot church buddies. File a claim with the higher ups. Spill it all. Let the heat rise. Begging the big man to cut the fees. A spark lit up Chuck's face. Exact those colors of real juice. That was the ticket. He folded fast. He bit immediately. The two old sharks began bickering over the details, quibbling over every scrap of aid, hiring muscle to keep the looters out. They droned on forever. I checked out. I ignored their grasping and scrolled. I played the video of the old craftsman making microscopic plates and hand-weaving straw. I uploaded and blew up. One take, the feed went totally nut. Everyone was floored by the precision, real talent, no filters, no edits. He's a pro. I smell money. I sent the kid for more samples. The geezer handed over his work happily. I grabbed a miniature wicker chair. A gem smaller than a thumb. The lens caught fibers thinner than silk. I put it on the world stage. Price $88,800 done. Within 24 hours, I was loaded. It was time to settle up. Bread and water felt cheap. I spotted some dark chocolate on the counter. I shaved off a crumb. I dropped the goods at his feet. He gawked at the huge dark slab. He looked shaken by the massive block. I said dig, and he took a nibble, one bite, and he froze. His wrinkled face beamed with delight. Pure, smooth bliss. Total heaven. Liquid gold. The madness began. Locals swarmed. Garrick just stood there gaping. He begged for hours. One little fragment, he gulped it down. He twisted up, yelling out, chest heaving, this stuff is 10,000 times better than a high. Midnight came. The town broke. Lugging their final rations, they swamped the place, eyes wild. Betting it all for a lick, the front porch turned into a riot. The steady chief was spooked. His door was about to give. A starving crowd waited, holding their last valuables, salted pork, poultry, and scraps. They offered everything for a tiny bite. Wild eyes searched the shadows. Raspy voices begged for a scrap. Chief, a crumb. Take it. Take my whole winter stash. 20 eggs. Take them. The old guy gripped the dark sacred brick. Hiding, he smiled like a miser, guarding his stash. Greed took over. A miracle. Heavenly sugar, better than any dream. It dissolved, rich and smooth. Time stopped. Then Elara walked in. She moved in. Stop this madness. This is sacred. No more grabbing. Line up tomorrow. Play fair. The chaos eased, but the heat remained. They didn't budge, sitting in the mud, staring at the door. Like addicts needing a hit, I watched through the window. Smirking, I opened my high-end app. My $88,000 chair sat there. Game's over, back to business. Sunrise, the main gates were buzzing. Trucks rolled in from the city. Baron Chuck wanted every single cent. Eyes fixed on every move. I felt the tension. The massive grain transport was finally starting. Perched on my stallion, I guided the royal inspector through the fortress's heavy iron barricades. We watched as empty carts entered, returning laden with sacks of premium white flour. The official leaned toward me, his breath hitching as he spoke in a low, shaky tone. The influence of this secret dynasty is limitless. He whispered, 30 shipments already. It is absolutely bone-chilling. I give a grim nod, my instincts screaming the truth. Legend of an ancient lineage from the Roman era was clearly no fairy tale. If I hadn't partnered with these titans, my rookie status as a lord would have meant certain death during the northern famine. Not until 40 heavy loads were on the road did Barnaby finally emerge, giving me a stiff, professional salute. My lord, the 40 promised shipments of flour have all been dispatched. The people's lives now depend on your mercy. I bowed with the gravity of a man facing the gallows. I will oversee this grain myself. Any thief caught stealing will hang from a rope. Barnaby's gaze sharpened into icy daggers. The world is watching. If you are a righteous leader, the Almighty will stay your hand. If not, well, I swore right then, if I take even a lick of this relief food, let me die a brutal death and rot. I kicked my horse into a gallop, shadowing the endless line of wagons as they headed toward the central market. Meanwhile, my focus shifted to something far more fascinating. The residents of Oakhaven were preparing for the winter planting. Honestly, as a city kid who does not know a wheat stalk from a common weed, I became weirdly obsessed with their farming. I adjusted the miniature camera lens directly over the open fields. While I tweaked the focus for a perfect shot, I searched for winter wheat tips on my laptop. Step 1. Aggressive plowing to prep the earth. Inside the container, Garrick was wrestling a heavy blade alongside his folks. The kid's raw power was unbelievable. Clouds of dirt exploded with every heavy pull and grunt. It finally dawned on me I did not know the first thing about ancient homesteading. I scrolled through the results until I found a section on soil chemistry that hooked me. The acidity needs to hit 6.5. How was I supposed to track that? I hunted around online and found some electronic ground testing probes for sale, but actually balancing the minerals. That seemed like a nightmare. I found organic compounds and microbes. Using every trick, I gripped the sensor, won from the garden shop, and pointed it toward the box, plunging it down. Garrick's kin were panting and straining at the plow when a gigantic, shiny metallic tower descended from the sky, slamming into the dirt with a heavy thud. The trio went rigid with shock. Garrick stared upward, howling, Lord, is that a holy javelin? Sent by an angel, his parents panicked and silenced him. Quiet, you fool, Dante invite his wrath. Skipping the drama, I checked the screen, which read 7.5, too alkaline. I reached for the nutrient bottle and summoned Elara. Take exactly 2 pounds of this celestial powder to Garrick's family. Blend it in, then soak the earth. Their harvest is safe. Elara's face lit up with a desperate joy. As she raced toward the acreage to deliver the news, Garrick, the creator, has sent down sacred nourishment. For your land, guaranteeing a windfall, the old man dropped to his knees, trembling in prayer. Praise be to the Sky Father, to a starving laborer. A full kitchen was worth more than a chest of jewels. I pulled the rod out and moved to the neighboring plot, checking the dirt and mixing up more supplements. Throughout the afternoon, all across Oakhaven, the phenomenon of the falling silver towers continued. Its rhythmic descent, the sensor plunged repeatedly while Elara acted as the divine messenger, sprinting through the town of relay orders. 3 pounds here. Give them 2.5 pounds over there. Your dirt is spent. Take 4 pounds but use twice the liquid. The residents of Oakhaven beamed with hope while the skeletal refugees from elsewhere glared with hollow eyes and bitter resentment. These peasants are touched by God, while our own homes are nothing but dry dust and bone. My chest tightened as I looked at them. My power had boundaries. I could not reach those distant territories. No matter how hard I tried, then the salvation gauge on the box's exterior began to spike into the red zone. Surging 5 units in a heartbeat, I stood frozen. Then realized what was happening. Baron Charles was feeding the poor. The camera panned to the cathedral plaza, where workers were erecting feeding stations. That secret family's top-shelf flour was already bubbling in huge iron vats. Vats of bubbling wheat mush steamed under the Baron's cold watch. He sat like a hawk while his treasurer scrambled in a total panic. Sweat soaked him. The land was a broken mess, killed by drought. Searing heat broke the peasants before the violent riots even started. Refugees flooded the town, leaving everything behind just to survive today. Now, skeletal beggars filled every corner, dying of hunger and plague. News of free food turned the starving crowd into a frenzy. They surrounded the sheds, but guards with spears held the line. Sharpened steel kept order as they clutched their broken wooden bowls. One walking skeleton finally reached the front of the long line. He did not eat, instead sprinting to a dying boy nearby. He poured the mush into the boy's mouth, whispering of survival. Share it, the boy urged as they traded sips of life. They collapsed into the filth, a spark of hope finally returning. A guard roared, "Do not you dare try to hoard food. Eat up, because the Baron will feed you again tomorrow morning." The man wept, realizing they finally served a truly kind master. 2 white sparks drifted upward, crossing miles in a single heartbeat. The data hit my desk, sending the salvation index soaring high. Breakfast was barely over when I saved hundreds from certain death. I was playing God, rewriting their fates with every mouse click. I hammered the keys, shattering the digital fog on my monitor. The world map unfolded as I pushed south into the woods. Past the Jag Peaks, I spotted a ruined village up north. Village number 2. I quickly panned back toward Oakhaven Village. Elara, what do they call that settlement to the far northeast? That is Brook Village, where Tob and his men were born. As she spoke, a golden flash lit up my monitor screen. 2 glowing labels appeared, Oakhaven Village and Brook Village, floating nearby. I clicked Brook Village and warped instantly. A fast travel system. This changes everything. I ordered Elara to gather the Brook refugees. 20 survivors were lined up before me within a few minutes. They were not rebels, just starving people tricked by promises of food. The giant Tob stood out like a mountain in the crowd. "What is it, Lord? I will do anything you need," he hollered. "Can I trade my pay for more chocolate?" His chief shushed. I got to the point. "You have seen our fields, thoughts?" Silence fell until Tob spoke up like a nervous little kid. "We want to work, but our own soil is back home. My family has 2 acres, but we were afraid to ask. I love serving you, but my old man needs his farm. Farming is his life." I nodded, having heard exactly enough today. "Tell Garrick to prep the second solar chariot. We are going home." Tob stared in shock. I just told him to get moving. "You will see when we arrive," the massive iron beast roared, alive. Think school bus scale, with solar grids on top. Dark glass caught the light, masking the passenger seats inside. We rigged up working stops and shades. Garrick and Tob spent days practicing, finally mastering the heavy machine. At least they weren't a death trap for pedestrians anymore. As the rig rattled toward Brook Village, I shifted focus. I grabbed the sprayer for the next phase, aimed high, choking the town's horizon in a thick, synthetic fog. From the moving deck, the refugees saw home. The shacks and dirt paths looked identical, but 30 days felt like forever. Everything felt ghostly and strange. Then a massive sheet of fake rain began drowning the village in white mist. This was no illusion, it was a heavy, soaking storm. Out of that low cloud, a giant dragon's skull appeared. It drifted through the haze, exhaling silver steam. The locals went wild, thinking their savior sent an angel of rain. "A blessing on our houses. My crops might actually live. Stop this thing right now. Let us out." They jumped before the wheels stopped turning. Sobbing and laughing, they raced straight into the mud. Garrick watched, baffled. Why leave a perfectly good seat to run like a maniac? Before he could finish the thought, Tob slapped him hard across the head. "You mocking my family?" Garrick winced, ducking low to the floorboards. "My bad. Totally my bad." The 2 were best friends again instantly. Meanwhile, the farmers had already vanished. They disappeared into the heavy, man-made storm. They collapsed at their fence lines, clawing at the wet dirt. They screamed thanks at the sky. This was like the handouts they got at the fort weeks ago. This was the soul-deep joy of coming home. Those 20 people just earned me 8 salvation index points. Back at Oakhaven, the group surrounded me. They begged for the chance to move back to the village permanently. I killed that idea immediately. "You farm during the day, but but you sleep here. Staying out there at night is suicide. They just stared, totally lost. They thought the war was over and the kings were dead. The new lord was providing, so why worry? Could he tell them the truth? So I just sighed. Elara stepped up. She knew how to work a room. She whispered to the crowd, her eyes filled with a dark, haunting intensity. Can't you hear his grief? He's mourning for us. Heaven sees a new disaster coming, something unnamed and terrible. But the spirits one T let him speak the truth. The crowd went silent. You don't question a warning from above. If the gods say it's a trap, period. Life in the village took on a desperate, rigid pace. At dawn, they boarded the shuttle to the fields. By sunset, they retreated to the fort like clockwork to survive. Watching them, I saw the waste. Acres of good dirt just rotting away. The harvest was pathetic. The reason was clear. The town used to thrive until the war sent the men on a suicide march. The rest were gone. Only 20 people remained in the ruins, paralyzed by fear on their tiny plots. They wouldn't teach a neighbor's land. I could let that continue. I called Elara and Barnaby to fix it. Barnaby was a shark with property. He moved fast, checking deeds in the list of who was still alive. He checked the labor camps for locals. Once he saw a dead family line, he took the land back. He gave free leases to the 20 survivors on the spot. He completely redrew the map of the town. Suddenly, everyone had twice the land. The change was electric. They'd been shocked back to life. Even the chain gangs watched with envy. Those prisoners had expected to just rot in their cells forever. But this new hope changed everything. They started working like dogs, hoping to earn their own freedom. They wanted a piece of the next land grab. Production soared, but the commute was still a disaster. Watching the bus bounce over those ruts gave me an itch. Infrastructure builds wealth. I found a job site. I swiped some cement and sand while the crew wasn't looking. Back home, I mixed up some gray sludge. Using a small blade, I carved a path through the dirt. I poured the mortar carefully, making a smooth ribbon. I leveled it with some plastic. To those tiny people, this was a divine miracle from the heavens. They saw mountains move and a stone river appear. To me, I was just playing with wet concrete. It was a tiny strip 3 inches wide and 50 feet long. 7 days later, it was rock hard. The grand opening brought everyone to the edge. The elders poked it, whispering about its unnatural perfection. They called it a road from the old empires. The kids didn't take care. They just used it as a slide. Parents yelled at them for ruining the holy path. Meanwhile, Garrick and Tob were gunning the engine, testing limits. A 6-mile haul used to mean an hour of nonstop arguing. Now, we arrived before the first thought even finishes. Brand new roads cut the commute in half, bringing a strange sense of calm. Meanwhile, Baron Charles kept crawling back to the family estate, hat in hand, pleading for enough food to stop a riot. Derek somehow made it out alive, though the Baron was too distracted to deliver the final blow. A shaky ceasefire held for now. Over in the capital, the Boy King was absolutely fuming, staring at desperate requests for emergency aid that he could not grant. The Archbishop checked his every move, leaving him totally powerless. As for me, I finally hit my stride. Every morning, I would casually airdrop supplies, using my humidifier to mimic a light, cooling mist. I was just living the dream, basking in my newfound fortune. I tried to buy my folks a nice place with the cash, but Dad would not take a dime, so I just dined on 5-star takeout alone. Late night films, quiet walks, empty markets. It was just me. Relationships only mess with the grind anyway. I loved the quiet. Until this evening, my buddy Kai and I were just wrapping up a barbecue by the water, enjoying the breeze. I headed home, took my seat by the display box, and started my rounds. Everything looked quiet inside those miniature walls. Elara was playing with the kids while Eamon, the local scholar, cheesed down runaways with a heavy wooden ruler. Lorcan the papermaker was chilling in the shops, bragging about poaching the best talent from the next town over. Fresh faces were expected in a few days. Then the frantic thunder of horse hooves shattered the nighttime peace. A carriage tore toward the stronghold at suicidal pace, flanked by armed guards as the horses skidded to a halt. Viscount Eldrick, decked out in velvet, practically fell out of the door. He shouted that his wheelman's skills had not skipped a beat, then offered a quick prayer to the far-off cathedral. Barnaby stepped out to meet him, knowing something was very wrong. "What is the emergency?" Barnaby asked. Eldrick's face went dark. "I need to stash my family inside Oakhaven's walls." Barnaby felt a knot form in his stomach. Eldrick let out a heavy breath. Up in the shadows of the Blackwood Peaks, the peasant revolt finally hit its breaking point. Thousands are on the move. My estate is right in their path. I have run the numbers, and there is no other way. My family needs the safety of your blessed stone walls. Hearing thousands made Barnaby look like he had seen a ghost. Eldrick clarified these were not just some hungry thieves. Whole territories were already drowning in the uprising. Pure chaos gripped the north as rebel lines advanced everywhere, far worse than the rumors suggested. I watched the scene from my overhead view and sighed. The moment of truth had finally arrived. That massive fallout from the famine had finally exploded, leaving his family in the village for safety. The Viscount bolted for White Raven to rally his men. Right before he took off, he pressed his palm against his chest. "If our defenses crumble, I will be back on my knees. I will beg your family to step in and save us." Barnaby gave him a sharp salute. "If it hits the fan, get back here fast." Once he left, a chill ran down my spine. He was a stubborn snob, but you spend enough time watching someone and you start to care. I could not just walk away now. Sending him against thousands with nothing but a sword felt like watching a dead man walking toward certain doom. I did not hesitate. I pulled the trigger on my backup plan. Time to deploy Solar Chariot 3, a total beast compared to the others. At just 14 centimeters, it scaled up to a massive 28 meters. It was a literal heavyweight titan. Garrick and Tob just stood there, necks craned all the way back. Their mouths hung open at the sheer size of the thin. You need that kind of muscle to move heavy artillery. Barnaby clipped them both on the head, barked a command, and pointed west. The big guy upstairs wants his jeer at the manor by sundown. After 48 hours of prep, the massive machine rolled out, loaded with catapults, grinding through the mud toward a fortress 40 miles away. At the same time, Sheriff Derrick was pushing 100 spearmen through the brutal mountain passes. He was cursing every noble bloodline in the book, venting his fury at a government that had completely fallen apart. My borders were fine until these invaders showed up. Despite the swearing, he was still the smartest tactician in the room. The old soldier knew how to play the game. Winning was not on the table, so he made a break for the manor. He would grab a meal first, hoping to look intimidating. If a fight broke out, he would just bail until the king the enemy was too much. When he finally hit the gates, Derrick came face to face with that monster transport. Seeing Garrick behind the wheel of that mechanical titan broke his brain. He just froze, staring at the impossible machine. Those bright, plastic-looking catapults took every hit without a scratch, looking weirdly bendy but tough as nails. They loaded up, pulled the lever, and sent stones flying over the walls, crushing the ground and obliterating Derrick's sense of reality. The blades shattered like cheap glass. I stared at the fragments, heart pounding as the pressure of the deadline suffocated me. Just before the next crate hit the floor, 10 scaled-down ancient artillery pieces sat there. Dense, heavy, and deceptive. At 1 to 200 scale, you'd swear they were just harmless desk ornaments. The tips were nothing but blunted resin, yet I could see the boss's gears grinding, plotting something far more sinister. He had us grind timber to points and shit the resin in jagged iron. Suddenly, those playthings transformed into bone-crushing instruments of total annihilation. Suddenly, the estate held 10 massive catapults and 10 high-powered bolt throwers. Watching from the wall, a cold shiver traced my spine. Oakhaven was just a quiet town anymore. It felt like a trap. The boss brushed off the logistics, mentioning the Oakhaven Hall as if he'd just picked up groceries. Fear flared in my chest, echoing the local crazies' warnings about that cursed place. He laughed, asking if we should plunder it under the moon. That joke hit me like a death sentence. Venture into those shadows, and whatever waits there will tear your soul apart. My stomach churned. I pulled my second-in-command close and hissed, "Shoot me if you have to, but Dunny let us cross that line tonight. I'm not looking to check into the afterlife just yet." Little did we know, the true horror was stirring in the peaks. Two massive insurgent factions slammed together in the high passes, one under Marvin the Muck, the other led by that snake, Lefty Buck. Their combined force topped 6,000 men, though barely 1,000 were actual hardened, remorseless executioners. The remaining thousands were just hollow-eyed peasants and terrified women clinging to life, kids huddled against their folks, forced into the freezing heights because the Royal Infantry blocked every single escape route. The North was locked tight by the Iron Duke himself, Montgomery, who was finally baring his fangs. Montgomery drove, bucking the crags. Those warlords sat over their meager scraps, realizing the northern path was a dead end. South was the only play. They aimed for the Baron's lands, lured by whispers of the church distributing charity meals to the masses. He had the stockpiles. Raid the granaries, they screamed. Butcher the elites and seize the bread. When word reached our gates, the old panic flared up instantly. The wounds from the previous uprising hadn't even scabbed over, knowing thousands of desperate killers were descending from the ridges. It felt like the floor was dropping out from under us. The Baron finally cracked. He frantically rounded up every hired gun and farmer to man the walls. Finding warm bodies was the easy part. Supplying them with weapons, a total nightmare. I dragged the head metalworker in, screaming for blades. The veteran looked broken, sir. The weapon racks are bare, he wheezed. My forge crews were disappearing overnight. Simple laborers were acting like they'd won the lottery. They were tossing around heavy purses of silver, paying their way out of service and vanishing into the night. The fires went out, leaving us in the dark. The Baron started connecting the dots. A ghost was funding this mass exodus, someone with more money than sense and a massive agenda. Could be the crown or the merchant guilds. All the evidence led back to that town, Oakhaven. Those snakes, he spat. Playing games again, he turned his lead officer, mount up. Get to Oakhaven, seize their metal, tell them the people need it. Let's see how generous they really are. The captain went white, giving a stiff salute. He bolted into the darkness. I watched the chaos unfold from my window, sipping my drink. Food, transit, heavy industry. The engine was turning, the veins of the world were pumping. The feudal age was gasping its last breath. My era of cold, hard progress had arrived.